Hello, everybody. Oh my goodness, the AP Lang exam is tomorrow. So I was live earlier tonight with Tim Freitas from the Garden of English, and we were live on YouTube. So I figured I would go live on TikTok and YouTube again later tonight to answer more questions. Because in that live, it was more of kind of like a talk through of tips. And so for this live, because the exam is tomorrow, I just kind of want to do like rapid fire question and answer and try to answer a lot of questions quickly. So welcome to those that are just joining. How are you all doing? How are we all feeling about tomorrow? Thank you so much, Ella. It's good to see you. Thank you for the likes on TikTok. Yes, please feel free to share it because I would love to help students and answer questions. So I'll be kind of switching back and forth. So in front of me is my phone with TikTok, and then the YouTube questions are to the side. So I'll be going back and forth and kind of answering them. I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. I'm just trying to, I guess, like get through all this just like you are. So please make sure you're prioritizing yourself. Please make sure that you are well prepared for tomorrow, that you're going to get plenty of rest. If you haven't packed your bag yet and you need to bring like your pencils and pens and a snack and stuff for tomorrow, make sure you do that. All right, let's see. Do counter arguments give you a chance at getting the evidence and commentary points? They can, because a lot of people actually think of it as, oh, this is a way to build sophistication, which is true, but you don't necessarily get the point for that. Like a lot of people try for it and they don't. But technically it can help with your evidence and commentary as well. So I say, if you are doing an argument essay or a synthesis essay, only include the counter argument. If you you have to have like a counterclaim and a rebuttal or a concession and refutation. Only include it if you really think it's going to help your argument. You want to make sure that it's furthering what you want to say. So you can work it into an existing paragraph, or you can have it be its own separate paragraph. You saved me for AP Lang. Thank you so much. Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you all for supporting my channel and watching my videos and things like that. I really appreciate it. Best tips for MCQ. Keep an eye on the time because sometimes people are like answering questions all the way till the last minute. So make sure that you're working at a comfortable pace. If you aren't sure about something and you're taking the digital test, I would answer it and bookmark it. That way you at least have an answer in case you have to go back, because I want you to minimize the clicking if you can. For the paper test, same thing. Make a guess, go with it, and if you have time, go back for it. I would say make sure that you're prioritizing the types of questions you do well. So if you're better at the writing MCQ, some of my students are actually going to start there. You just got to make sure that you're lining it up on your bubble sheet. So let's say it's question 24. You've got to make sure that that's where you're answering. I would also say make sure that you're reading the surrounding sentences too. So like if it says something about lines 5 to 7, you should probably be reading like a couple lines before it and a couple lines after it, because sometimes there's a context clue. So that's really important as well. Don't get hung up on words and like the meaning of words unless there's a question about it. A lot of my students like to read the questions first and then read the passage because it helps them read with a purpose. I know that strategy doesn't work for everybody, but for some people, it really does help. What order of the FRQ should we do? Play to your strengths. A lot of people like to do synthesis first simply because it's the most time consuming. I would say if you think that would help you, like if it's going to be a relief to get that done, then absolutely do so. And then I would say prioritize whichever essays you do well. So for instance, most of my students are taking the test in order because they want to get synthesis done with, and then they feel like they're best at rhetorical analysis. Arguments, their least favorite. However, I do have a couple students who are doing synthesis, argument, rhetorical, because rhetorical is their least favorite or the one that they're weakest at. So they're putting that last. And I tell them, put your weakest essay last. Oh, thank you for the gift on TikTok. Yeah, we're trying to get to 2 Earths. And so I tell them to put their weakest essay last simply because, oh, thank you. All right, we'll reset our goal. I so appreciate y'all. The reason why is because I'd rather have you rushing through the essay that is your weakest as opposed to your strongest, because we want to prioritize the essays where we can get as many points as we can. And for some people, you're kind of good at all 3 essays equally. I do have 1 or 2 students that's doing RA first because that's their best, and then synthesis, then argument. So do them in the order that you feel you're strongest at. Thank you for following, by the way. So if we haven't met yet, my name is Coach Hall. I am an AP Lang teacher from Arkansas. I've got like tons of content on YouTube and TikTok. If you have questions that I haven't answered, I'm just starting my live. I'll go live for an hour or two, just kind of depends. But if you are trying to cram for the exam, I have plenty of old videos to help you. Also, don't just unfollow tomorrow after the test, because if you are a junior this summer, I will be doing lots of content surrounding college applications and how to work on those essays and things like that. So I would love it if you would stick around for the summer. And then in the fall, I'll go back to my AP Lang content. So it would really help if you recommend my channel and my content to your friends if you have friends who are taking AP Lang next year. But thank you so much for your support. Okay, let's see. Do you have any tips to avoid repeating myself in an argument essay? Yeah, so that's a good question. I think actually students worry about this with all the essays, is like, how do I not have like redundancies in my commentary? So I think the thing that you need to think about is try to make it specific to the evidence that you're talking about. So why is it important for argument? Ask yourself, like, what does this example show? Like, why did you choose this example? And think about like how it proves the thesis. You want to use the wording from the prompt, because sometimes people like give us examples in commentary, but they never actually reference the language of the prompt. So last year, it was like the value of timely decisions. You want to use that phrase in your commentary as well. Make sure that you're connecting back to it. I would also say, think about, for argument, the real world implications. So like short term and long term, how does this help or hurt society? Who does it impact? Things like that. So really pushing yourself to kind of expand your commentary. Just keep asking yourself why, how, and so what. Sometimes you feel like you've already answered the question, but you should keep asking yourself why to extend it. Because remember, the reader can't infer. So you have to give us an argument. You have to give us enough context, like maybe 2 to 3 sentences explaining your evidence. Like I told my students last week, pretend you're explaining it to like a 10-year-old, but write it as if you're explaining it to an AP teacher. Like write it in academic language, but go so in depth that you're like explaining it to a 10-year-old, meaning that you want to make sure that it's really clear what you're talking about, and then give us that commentary. What are some rhetorical choices we should memorize to use? Okay, so there are some that come up frequently. There are some devices that come up frequently, and those would be things like repetition, comparison, contrast, anecdotes, but you can also use verbs. So instead of saying uses repetition, say repeats. Instead of comparison, say compares. Instead of contrast, say contrasts or juxtaposes. Instead of saying uses an anecdote, say recalls a time when, or references or reminisces on. There's other strong verbs that you can use as well. Justifies, acknowledges, presents. So if you get to a passage and you're like, I don't know what rhetorical choices they're using, ask yourself, what are they doing? And you want to analyze chronologically, because the speaker has what we call a line of reasoning. So they have a very logical presentation of ideas. They put their passage in a logical order. So if you follow their logical order, then it will help the logic of your essay. So say things like, the speaker begins by, and then whatever the choice is, in order to, like, give us the what and the why in your topic sentence. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? Then think about the middle and the end. Follow their line of reasoning, because otherwise, it's not bad if you jump around per se. It's called device driven. I've seen essays that are device driven that score pretty well, but it helps if it's in chronological order. Okay, sorry, there's like so many questions coming through. Tips on the sophistication point. Let's see. I have a whole video of this on my YouTube channel for rhetorical analysis, so I would love it if you go check that out after the live. If you just type in Coach Hall writes rhetorical analysis sophistication, it should come up. It's about a month old. It's got a white thumbnail, because I've done other sophistication videos in the past. Some tips for sophistication. For rhetorical analysis specifically, you really want to think about why they're making that choice for that audience on that occasion. You really want to be connecting to the rhetorical situation, which, if you're familiar with Space Cat, the space part of Space Cat is the rhetorical situation. If your teacher uses soapstone, the soap part of soapstone is the rhetorical situation. So you want to be thinking about, okay, let's say they're speaking at a funeral. Why are they making this choice? Because they're speaking at a funeral. Or let's say their audience is the American public. Let's say it's a president. What do they value? What do they share in common? Why is the president making this choice for that audience? So we want to really dig into that. So a couple of videos on my channel, if you're looking to study and cram, I would look up the rhetorical analysis sentence frames. That's a pretty recent video. The sentence frames are actually like super helpful. I would also encourage you to look up the video, something about my best tip for rhetorical analysis. That one goes into how you start to connect to the rhetorical situation. So that's one way for sophistication. For rhetorical analysis, also, I would say think about any possible complexity or tension. So it could be historical tension, like if something is going on historically at the time that's relevant, like a world war or a civil rights movement or whatever it is, think about that. Or there could be tension between the speaker and the audience. So like, is it a mother-child like relationship? Is it like a subordinate and their superior kind of thing? That way, if there's tension, you could analyze why there's tension and how the person navigates that. So that's just some tips for the rhetorical analysis sophistication point. But remember, I have a video on that as well. Chunking is when you divide the text into sections. So you want to basically look for shifts or like movements. So basically, I tell my students, because of the length of the passage, usually you can divide it up into either beginning, middle, and end, or like first half, second half. So that way you're following the line of reasoning. So yeah, chunking is just dividing it up into sections. They don't have to be equal sections either. So you could have like a really short section, a longer section. It's just kind of like the movements of the passage. Let's see. Hey, Tom, how are you? So the structure of a paragraph, someone asked about the structure of a paragraph. In general, for all essays, you're going to need a topic sentence, which is your claim. Then so the claim is going to tell us what the main idea of the paragraph is about, and it should be tied to your thesis. It's not just some random claim. And so then you need evidence. For synthesis and rhetorical analysis, I recommend 1 to 2 sentences of evidence. Try to choose a short quote and weave it into a sentence of your own. And then I recommend having about 3 sentences of commentary if you can, and then another layer of evidence, commentary, and a concluding sentence. The concluding sentence kind of wraps it all up. Don't introduce new ideas, like tie up your paragraph. And then for an argument essay, it's the same formula. You can either have 1 core example in your paragraph or 2 examples. You can layer it. But remember, with argument, because you're having to provide your own evidence, you need probably 3 sentences, no more than 5. I would stick closer to 3 if I'm being honest, where you're explaining your evidence. You want to tell us who it is. So like, let's say you're writing about, I don't know, Maddie Ziegler from Dance Moms. I would say Maddie Ziegler, comma, a child star from the hit TV show Dance Moms, comma, and then I would like finish my sentence. And you want to talk about, like, let's say we're talking about competition. We want to talk about like what she shows us about competition. So you want to give us about 3 sentences of evidence for like explaining your evidence and argument, and then at least 3 to 4 sentences of commentary, especially if you're just doing 1 example. If you're doing 2 examples in a paragraph, you might shrink that a little bit. Best tips on MCQ. So I covered this at the beginning. I do have a video on this too. And I'm not saying that to dismiss anyone's question. I'm just saying that to remind you that I have content there, because I know some people are waiting for questions to get answered. So I do have a video on this if you want more detail than what I can give you in the live. My best tip would be know your strengths and weaknesses. So are you better at the writing or the reading? The reading's going to come first. If you're better at the writing ones, make sure you save time for those. Don't rush the stuff that you're good at. Use process of elimination. So get rid of 2 or 3 answer choices that you know are wrong. If an answer choice is partially right, but it's obviously not entirely right, then it's not your answer. Sometimes students talk themselves into a wrong answer because they're like, well, this part's true, but this part, I don't remember. Maybe I just read it wrong. No, like one of the answers is bound to be only half right. So that's not right. If it's only partially right, it's a wrong answer. Oh, you're so welcome. I actually really enjoy doing lives. They're kind of fun. Time management tips. Okay, so it's easier to give time management tips for the FRQs, the essays, because there are some things that you can do to pace yourself. So, first of all, prioritize the essays that you feel strongest in. If you're like, I get really good scores on rhetorical every time I do it, prioritize that. Don't put that one last. I would put that first or second. If you're like, I'm good at all of them, then maybe try to look at the prompts and see which one you think is hardest. If that's going to stress you out, then just ignore that tip though. But basically, you can write a short intro. So, worst case scenario, just write a defensible thesis. If you have time, you can write a couple sentences plus your thesis. So, short intro, that's one way to save time. Please do not write a half-page introduction. All you're going to do is earn the thesis point with that, and you can earn that in one sentence. So, long intros are a no on exam day. Save time. You can do 2 or 3 body paragraphs. Most of my students do 2 body paragraphs, and my students score very well on the exam. Not just the essay scores I give them during the year, like their actual exams, they score really well. And so the key though is if I tell them if you're going to do 2, that's fine. Just develop them very thoroughly. They don't have time for a third because of how thorough they're being. Now, if you're used to writing 3 body paragraphs and that's working for you, then don't change that tomorrow. Just know that 2 is okay, but 3 is also good. I've worked with some students, so especially some of my tutoring students, they can write 3 body paragraphs super quickly. So go for that if that's what you want. But please know that 2 body paragraphs is okay. Also, to save time, you technically do not need a conclusion, especially if you're not trying for the sophistication point. Just having a conclusion alone does not earn the sophistication point. In fact, we see so many really cheesy conclusions. I would much rather you just end your essay with a body paragraph and make sure it sounds good than to have this like super quick, cheesy conclusion. So if it's going to be just you restating what you literally just told us in the other paragraphs, don't waste your time doing it. It's okay. Conclusions can elevate the quality of your essay. If you're really good at like these thought-provoking conclusions, then go for it. But if conclusions are not your thing, save time tomorrow by focusing on the body paragraphs and don't worry about long intros and conclusions. Someone just commented on one of my videos, I'm going to cry. Y'all, you're going to do fine tomorrow. Just use your time. Why does my teacher say, wow, I just stuttered. I'm so sorry. Why does my teacher say that a conclusion is necessary? I don't know. Perhaps your teacher is not thinking about it as a rough draft. The exam is a rough draft. So I promise you, I've been a reader for 2 years. I've been in AP Lang for a while. A conclusion is not necessary. There is nothing in the rubric that says you need one. Can I write 2 methods in rhetorical analysis? If by methods you mean like methods of development, like comparison or description, yeah, if you see that, like if that's what you want to analyze and it makes sense for the passage, then go for it. Do we need a counterclaim? No. Thank you for sharing the live, by the way, and thank you so much for the likes. I really appreciate it. We also have a gift goal. I get like maybe 1/100th of a penny for every earth that I'm given. So, that'll add up to a penny eventually. Should I be afraid about my first year of AP Lang next year? No, don't be afraid of the class. Is a 25 out of 45 on multiple choice bad? No, actually you want to get, if you're shooting for a 3 composite, you want to be getting approximately 23 multiple choice questions correct, and then 4 out of 6 on your essays. Can you score lower than that and still get good essay scores and get a 3? Yes. Oh, thank you so much for the earth. But like I tell my students 23 because that's like a comfortable range. That's like a little more than 50%. So if they can get that 23 out of 45 and 4 out of 6 on the essays, then they are they're very comfortably at a 3. If you can get approximately like 30 to 35 on multiple choice and 4s and 5s on your essay, then you're looking at like a 4 composite, possibly like with 5s and on maybe 5s and 6s on your essay, then a 5 composite. You do not need a perfect score on your essays to get the 5. So some of my students who get a 5, they get approximately 35 questions on MCQ and usually about 5 out of 6, I think, on their essays, and they get a 5 composite. So can you explain line of reasoning? So line of reasoning is basically just a logical progression of ideas. So you want to make sure that when you're writing an essay that you have a thesis, and that thesis is going to be your overarching claim. It just needs to be defensible. So it has to be something you can prove. Then you need to have at least 2 body paragraphs. One of them must be really strong. To be considered for the higher points on the rubric, you got to have at least one good body paragraph. So, in your body paragraph, to help your line of reasoning, you're going to need specific evidence. So, for synthesis and rhetorical analysis, usually it helps to have direct quotes. Short quotes, though, don't be dropping in these huge quotes. And then plenty of commentary. You're also going to want to think about your transitions. So, simple words like therefore or thus can help. Furthermore and moreover. So, moreover might appear on the multiple choice, by the way. Moreover means furthermore. The way I remember it is that they both have more in it. And then some other words that you might be able to use would be like consequently or subsequently. So using those transition words to guide your reader through the essay really does help. That's how you can create a better line of reasoning. Sorry, I'm just scrolling. Why does the practice test Q1 look weird? What do you mean by weird? They now have like bullet points and stuff on theirs. Like there's going to be bullet points where it's like, make sure you have a thesis, evidence, commentary. And there's a bullet point about grammar. Ignore that. You can have spelling mistakes and you can still score well. I wish they would take that off, honestly. You can do 2 body paragraphs for the essays. You should have an intro and 2 body paragraphs minimum. Someone asked about closed and open thesis statements. I prefer a closed thesis statement for the exam. So most of you probably write a closed thesis statement anyway. It's just easier for students. It's when you have your main ideas in your thesis. When you transition to college and you're writing longer papers, that's when an open thesis is more appropriate. So for instance, if you're writing like a 10-page paper, you're not going to have a closed thesis. For the exam, open thesis is totally fine. How early do you have to show up? I told my students to get there at least 15 minutes before the start of the test. Maybe sooner if you're worried about like other things. Excuse me. In a synthesis essay, can we use chores as evidence? So in a synthesis essay, your evidence should come from the sources. Remember that you need at least 3 sources. So they're going to provide you with 6. You need to cite at least 3 of them. They can do 6 to 8, but in the past, they've really been doing 6. And honestly, 2 of them are typically some kind of visual text. So the benefit to those is that you don't have to read them. It's just like a graph or a chart or something. You just have to interpret. Let's see. I saw one about my teacher said. I always love those questions. My teacher said that it might be repetitive to use the quote and that it's yes. So for argument, if you're talking about argument, yes, there's going to be typically a quote in the prompt. Don't bother writing that. Like seriously, do not bother writing that. So if it says like so-and-so once said, and then there's this quote, and then it says, write an essay in which you assert your position on insert topic here. Don't bother restating the quote because it's just a waste of time. We know what the quote was. Like those of us reading your essay know what the quote was. Just zero in on the topic you're supposed to write about. I'm good at my essays, but I'm horrible at MCQ. What can I do? Honestly, since the test is tomorrow, there isn't really anything that I think you can or should do at this point for MCQ because MCQ is very passage based. So if you are strong at your essays, I would say do the very best you can tomorrow on the MCQ and get as many points as you can because each one's going to be worth 1 point. And then just use your essays as time to shine. So make sure you do answer all of your questions though. So don't leave any MCQ blank. Chores is for argument. Yes, chores is like an acronym that you can use for argument to try to come up with evidence. Is a 38 out of 45 MCQ and 3s and 4s like a 4? Approximately yes, because that's a very high MCQ score. There's an online score calculator from Albert.io that's pretty accurate. There's also a way to calculate your score. So yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. How many MCQs are on the exam? There's 45 questions that you answer in 1 hour. How do you interpret a picture for synthesis? Okay, so if it's a picture, ask yourself, what is this picture showing? So like literally like what's in the picture? And how does it relate to the other sources? So if they give you a picture as one of the first couple sources, they did this on the wind farm prompt. And I think part of the reason why is because they were worried that students might not know what a wind farm is. Because if you don't live near one, you might not have ever seen one. So they put the picture first. The problem is a lot of people are like, okay, this is a picture of a wind farm. What do I do with it? So what I would recommend is if you get a picture and you're like, I don't know what to do with this or how to interpret it, I would pause, I would skip it, and I would read the other sources, then go back to the picture, because then it's going to make more sense. So with the wind farm picture, it's literally just all these wind turbines. And you can tell, oh, okay, it shows that there's a big open field. There's flat land. They're tall, like they're super big, and they need a lot of space. And there's a mountain in the background. So then I would just jot those notes down and I would move on. So that's kind of how you can do like a picture, is just kind of like ask yourself quite literally, what is it showing? And then how does it relate to the other sources? Someone asked what chores is. Chores stands for current events, history, outside knowledge, reading, experience, and science. So basically it's just different types of evidence that you can pull from for the argument. You don't have to use all the categories. It's just a way to help you brainstorm. Tips for the MCQ with adding or removing sentences. So the way I tell my students to do it is to basically look at the sentence they want you to add or delete, just so you know which one it is. Read the paragraph and then ask yourself, let's say it's an add a sentence one. Read the paragraph and ask yourself, should I add the sentence there? Yes or no? Sometimes it helps to read it with the sentence added. And so should I add it? Yes or no? And why? So if you say, yes, I should add it because it provides, let's say, a definition. Great. Now go to the answer choices. Only look at your yes answers and see which one is most close to what you just said. Instead of starting with A and working to E for those, I think it really is helpful to save time if you just say, should I add this? Yes or no? And why? And then find the answer that's closest. We add sentences if they provide useful information. It has to be on topic, like if it helps with clarity. We delete sentences that are not relevant. If it is interrupting the flow of the paragraph, like if you're talking about, let's say, statistics, and then the next sentence is these statistics, and it says, let's put a sentence in between here. And that sentence has nothing to do with statistics. Do not add a sentence there because it's interrupting the flow. So we delete stuff that's not relevant. We add stuff that is. If you're stuck on MCQ, should we guess B or C? B. Okay, don't quote me on this because it's just like, it's not totally proven, but A and D are actually slightly, like teeny tiny bit more common. It's like A and D are supposedly a slight bit more common, and then B and D. C was like, or no, A and D, and then it was like B and E, and then C was last. Now, granted, this was like literally like it was 2 questions difference between some of these things. But if you had to choose a letter randomly, I would choose A or D. Just me. Can you give us an ideal time breakdown of the 2 hours for the essays? Okay, great question. You're going to get 2 hours and 15 minutes. What they're going to tell you is you have a 15-minute reading period. So they're going to say your 15-minute reading period has begun. 15 minutes later, they're going to say you are advised to move on to your first essay. Then 40 minutes later, they're going to say you're advised to move on to your second essay. And then I think they give you like a 20-minute warning. I can't totally remember. It's either 20 or 10. I think it's 20. Okay. You don't have to follow that timeline. So let's say you're starting with synthesis first. I would maybe spend 10 minutes reading and planning for synthesis, about 40 writing it. Most of my students, myself included, I need about 45 minutes for a good rhetorical analysis essay. I like that one. I need more time with it. So I would want 45 for rhetorical analysis, maybe 50 if it's like a good prompt where I have a lot to say. And then I would have 40 or 35 remaining for argument, because argument's my weakest. Like if I were a student taking the test tomorrow, me personally, argument is my weakest. So I would put it last because I can get an okay score rushing. So like, I know I need a thesis. I know I need a couple of body paragraphs with specific evidence and commentary. I know that I can just kind of throw that together. So whatever, I'm not saying you should, I'm not advocating for this, but worst case scenario, if you're running out of time, give us a thesis and at least one body paragraph with specific evidence and commentary. Like I saw an essay once where the student had a thesis and then they had a body paragraph. And I was like, okay, I see the word because, I see the word shows. We've got some commentary. We've got evidence here. And I'm like, well, it's at least a 1-2-0. Now, it didn't move beyond that, but hey, they got a 3 out of 6 just by like they had like 0 time left and they wrote that and it was okay. All right, let's see. Yes, you can have a watch. It just can't be something that like sends or receives messages. So like my Fitbit here that I need to charge, like literally the battery is dying. I could not wear this tomorrow if I was a student because technically it can send and receive messages. It selectively chooses not to work, but it's capable of such. So I couldn't wear this. No Apple Watches. You can get like just a basic watch though. And no timers. I saw a post on social media about like you can't have timers. Something in the rule book, I guess, like no stopwatches. Now, don't quote me on that. That's what someone posted something from what looked like the College Board, and it said no stopwatches. Okay, let's see. I see all the questions, y'all. I'm trying so hard. Let's see. Can I use an ellipses when citing evidence? You can if it's necessary. Like I would recommend using shorter quotes and kind of breaking it up into separate things instead though. Cause like the ellipses, like basically people think like, oh, I can just put a couple words and the ellipses and then the end of my quote and you're cutting out like a ton of stuff and it makes it hard to read. So only use the ellipses if it's like meaningful. If you only want a snippet of that quote, just choose the words you actually want. Like if there's like 5 words that you're like, oh, this is the key thing. Oh, thank you so much. A tiny. Those are cool. That's actually kind of fun to say. So you can just use that short quote. Like the ellipses it's not that it's wrong. It's just, I feel like most students do it in a way that makes it actually harder for us to read what they're trying to do. What do I do if I don't know any rhetorical choices on the essay? So let's say you're reading it and you're like, I don't know what's happening here. So ask yourself, what is the writer doing? And use a strong verb. So presents, introduces, justifies, acknowledges, identifies, whatever it is. Thank you for sharing the live, by the way. Use strong verbs if you can't find a rhetorical choice, right? Because a rhetorical choice is just what they're doing. So use strong verbs to tell us what they're doing. You don't need fancy words for it. Also, word choice and tone are in literally everything. So start there if you need to. Oh, thank you so much, Brayden. All right, let's see. Brayden says, can you explain the MCQ guessing strategy again and any small tips for sophistication? Okay, so the MCQ guessing strategy. Remind me again in the comments what I was talking about because I don't know what I said that was the guessing strategy. I did say at one point to use process of elimination. So that just means like there's going to be 5 answer choices, A, B, C, D, and E. Right? So you want to make sure that you are eliminating the ones that you know are wrong. I think it was A or D. Oh, okay. So I was looking at some information, some testing stuff, not anything official, but I literally just took a bunch of practice tests and I tallied up like how many of each answer choice there were. And it just so happened to be that A and D were the most common. However, it was only a marginal difference. And so I made a comment about this to another AP teacher, and she's in the math and sciences. And she was like, yeah, actually, there's this rumor that C is the most popular answer, but really statistically, they've done studies and A or D have a slight edge. And so she's been a teacher a lot longer than I have been. And she said, for years, I've just told my students choose A or choose D. Don't make a pattern, just choose one or the other. So, oh, thank you so much, Kara. So basically that's where that whole thing came from. So I tell my students choose A or D. And because if you're just guessing, like and only choose that if you literally have not read the question and you're just like, I need an answer. If you can use process of elimination and you're like, oh, A's wrong, well, then don't choose A, right? Now, sophistication is tricky. The benefit to sophistication is even if you don't get the point, usually if you try for it, it helps your evidence and commentary. So what I would recommend is choose one essay to go for the sophistication point on if you want to. If you're like, I never get that point, I'm never going to get it, then don't go for it. But if you're like, oh, I really connect with this rhetorical analysis prompt, I really think I can go for sophistication, then just try to have more commentary, try to really analyze why they're making those choices for that audience on that occasion. Maybe think about the complexity or tension between like speaker and audience or like what's going on in the world at the time. You can also work on your style. So Try to use colons or dashes correctly. I have videos of this on YouTube if you need a little help. They're short videos. Try to include adjectives and adverbs. It makes it more precise. So if you just say something like, the writer says, we shouldn't call them the writer, use their name. But if you say, the writer says, that's so plain. Try to say like, the writer logically asserts or passionately asserts or claims, whatever it is. If you add adjectives and adverbs, that can really help the precision in your writing. And as a tip for rhetorical analysis, please don't say the audience. Like, tell us who the audience is. It's usually in the prompt. If you somehow get an article tomorrow or an excerpt of a nonfiction text, and then you don't know who the audience is, ask yourself, who is most likely to read this? Like, if it is a book about science, then presumably there are going to be people who are scientists who are interested in it. If it's an article talking about education, is it geared towards parents? Is it geared towards teachers? So when you're writing rhetorical analysis, don't just say the audience, because that looks really lazy and sloppy. So tell us who the audience is each time. When it comes to message, argument, or purpose, don't just say, oh, this helps them convey their message. Tell us what the message is and vary your wording a little bit. Use synonyms. Purpose is the same thing. It's really important. So you want to make sure you're connecting to those things, and that can help. If you want more tips on sophistication, especially for rhetorical analysis, I do have a video that's pretty recent on YouTube about rhetorical analysis sophistication. The thumbnail is white. It was published about a month ago. Definitely go check out that video because I tried to be very thorough. Oh, thank you so much. All right, we got both Earths. Okay, it says reset, so we'll try to reset that. Okay, this time it says roses. All right. Let's see. So for synthesis, oh, someone said no, the Federalist Papers. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you took APUSH, honestly, you can probably use some historical examples in your argument, hopefully. I don't have any predictions on the prompts. I honestly, I've been asked this, and I think I've said, here's what I know the College Board hasn't done in a while. Thank you for the roses, by the way. They have not done something besides the Gandhi letter. They haven't done a letter super recently, and they haven't done something that was from somebody who wasn't American recently. So I'm waiting for something like that to happen again. I'm waiting for like an article or a nonfiction book. I'm also waiting for them to do like I don't know, like something old. They haven't done something old in a while. So I'm waiting for something. I love these recent prompts where they're like contemporary speeches, but I'm just worried that they're going to do something different. If it's something different, like it's still rhetorical analysis. So no matter what they give you tomorrow, look for choices and the message, argument, or purpose. The task doesn't change. So even if like one of the prompts is hard, just remember this is what I'm supposed to do for this essay, and then just do that. I know that sounds kind of obvious, but seriously, like just because the prompt is hard, don't freak out. Just do the best you can. Yeah, the Thoreau one is hard. I do not like the Thoreau one. If you've read Thoreau, you'll understand. He's actually like one of my least favorite writers. I had to read him in college, and it was not one of my favorite classes as an English major. Will anything from AP Psych help? Honestly, possibly. I don't really know what's totally covered in AP Psych, but if you know about some of the different, I don't know, like Freud and Skinner and some of those, you could possibly talk about it depending on like what the prompt is. So like basically when you're choosing your evidence tomorrow, thank you for the rose, by the way. When you're choosing your evidence tomorrow, if it can prove your thesis for argument, like if it can be related to the prompt, go for it. Because honestly, sometimes those are the most interesting essays to read, is when people know like niche stuff. Do you need a counterclaim for any of the essays? You can include it for synthesis or argument, but it's not required. In a synthesis essay, does a body paragraph include for analysis due to the sources being stated? Okay, so like, thank you, Sadie. You should have more commentary than evidence, regardless of which essay that it is. So if you're having like claim, evidence, commentary, concluding sentence, that's like kind of like the formula for a body paragraph in a lot of cases. Yes, just please make sure that you have plenty of commentary. You don't want to do like all your evidence in one and then all your commentary. If you're doing multiple pieces of evidence, you want to layer it because you want the commentary to explain the evidence. So it's kind of like, here's my evidence, here's my explanation. Here's my evidence, here's my explanation. Can I use the same source for 2 examples in a body paragraph? You can. Just remember, you need 3 different sources. And so because of that, what I mean by 3 different sources is basically if you cite source A, source B, source C, that's 3 different sources. But if you do A, B, A, that's just 2. So you can cite the same source more than once. It's actually pretty common to do so because sometimes there's just a couple good quotes in the source. So just remember that you have to have 3 total. And before you move on from your synthesis tomorrow, please double check that you've clearly cited them. It really helps if you do what we call a parenthetical citation, which is when you put it in parentheses at the end of the sentence. So like you have your sentence and then it says like parentheses and you put like source A because like readers are like, oh, look, parentheses, there's a citation. So it helps. A counterclaim can help with the sophistication point, but a lot of people do that and they don't earn the sophistication point. Only about 5 to 9% of students get the sophistication point. It depends on like which essay and which year because it ranges. It's not like a predetermined number, by the way. When I say that it's like 5 to 9%, what I mean is the smallest number I've seen was 5%, and the largest number I've seen was approximately 9%. So there's no like preset quota or something. What should I do if I don't understand what the prompt is asking? If it's for argument, sometimes the argument prompts are a little tricky. If it's a long quote, then like look for context clues in the quote. Just really break down. Like last year it said timely decisions, right? And a lot of people didn't know what that meant. So if something is timely, it's happening at the right time. If you had read the quote, you could kind of tell that he was contrasting quick decisions and timely decisions. And so even if you didn't know what timely meant, if you knew what quick meant, then you could tell he was contrasting it, then you could kind of infer. So if you don't understand what the question's asking for argument, don't panic. Just talk yourself through it a little bit more slowly. Be like, okay, here's the phrase I'm supposed to write about. Now let me think, what do I know? Like a couple years ago, it was more than a couple, but there was a prompt about artifice. I hate that prompt, by the way, just because it was hard for students. But if you didn't know what artifice was, there were some clues in the quote to help you. But even so, artifice kind of sounds like artificial. It has to do with being fake. So just talk yourself through it. But like, even if you're not sure, give us something because we can at least reward you for what you put on the page. So just do the best you can. Yeah, timely is like a timely decision. This was last year's prompt, so y'all won't necessarily need to know this because it's going to be a different prompt. But timely just means that you do it like at the right time. Like you use the information that you have and you make a decision, like the best decision you can at the time. It's not impulsive. It's just the best decision at the time. Do you need to cite an RA? No, you don't. Some people do because their teacher has them do it. But like, no, you don't need to cite in rhetorical analysis. Like you can quote it, but you don't need to tell us the line number or the paragraph number. Is it possible to interpret a document incorrectly on the synthesis essay? And would you not get the evidence point because of it? Great question. It's rare. I personally think it's rare that this happens. Like, has it happened before? Yes. But like what it's more likely, it's not that people misinterpret it. What happens is people try to cherry pick their evidence. So like, let's say the whole source is like a pro source, like it's in favor of the topic. And then let's say that they have a counterclaim and rebuttal and they're like, although some people think this, and then they refute it. If you quote the counterclaim and you're like, according to source C, some people think, and that's not really what the point of the source is, I could see how that would potentially impact your evidence, I suppose. So it's not really that people misinterpret things sometimes. It's more that they just kind of like are like overly selective. Like they're trying to manipulate the source to make it say what they want it to say, if that makes sense. A lot of the stuff is very cut and dry. So if you're worried that you're misinterpreting a source, I would find a different quote or a different source. But I wouldn't stress too much about misinterpreting it. That's just my opinion, but that's not something I would stress over just because I think it's really rare that people do that. So I would say the biggest thing for synthesis is make sure that you are trying to create what we call a conversation of sources Thank you for sharing the live. So a conversation of sources means that you are trying to put two sources together in a paragraph. So like you can do two sources that have similar perspectives or talk about the same topic. So you could have like your evidence and commentary, and you could say similarly, so and so, whoever the author is, says this, and then you put some commentary. And that way it's like, oh, hey, two people agree on this topic. Or you can actually put two sources against each other. I've seen students do it where they make like a counterclaim and a rebuttal, and they're like, according to this person, it's this. However, it's actually this. And they like, you can put like the opposite source. You don't have to. You don't have to cite something in your counterclaim and rebuttal, but some people like to. So yeah, thank you for your question on YouTube. All right, can you go over synthesis statements like if-then statements? I don't know what you mean by like if-then. Like I know what an if-then statement is. I don't know what you mean by how that relates to synthesis. So I'm happy to answer, but I'm not totally sure I understand your question. Also, please don't spam the chat. Like I understand there's ways to try to get me to see your comments quicker, but I've got, I don't know, 462 on TikTok, and I don't know how many are on YouTube because the phone's in the way, but I'm really trying to answer everybody's questions, and I'll stay on as long as I can. I'm not quite tired yet, so don't worry. Can we use logos? For logos, ethos, pathos, you can. Whenever I cringe, I'm going to be really honest with y'all. I cringe when I see a whole paragraph about logos and then one about ethos and one about pathos, because you can still score okay with that, but usually you're ignoring actual rhetorical choices and you're just looking at the appeals. And like all three are not equally present in all passages. I do have a video on YouTube. If you're like, whoa, my teacher just said right about logos, ethos, pathos. I have a video on YouTube. If you search for Coach Hall writes rhetorical appeals, it explains how to write about the appeals better. Rhetorical choices can be things like repetition, comparison, contrast, anecdotes, allusion, but you can also use strong verbs. That really helps. So presents, identifies, justifies, acknowledges. Just tell what they're doing. Like if they're somehow flattering the audience, flattery is a choice. If they're criticizing the audience, that's a choice. Yeah, so I just answered what are some of the main ones that we see most frequently. Call to action is another good one. So call to action is usually at the end. You can use a call to action in your own essays too. I've seen students do this for like argument or synthesis. They make their own call to action in the conclusion. But yes, you can analyze call to action as a rhetorical choice. Thank you for the reminder, because that's another really common one. You can do, someone said RA thesis is closed and synthesis and argument is open. You can do a closed thesis for any of the essays. There's actually kind of like a lot of people when they write a closed thesis, it's still like closed does not mean bad. Like closed just means you're indicating your main ideas. So there's nothing wrong with a closed thesis, especially because these essays are short. You have 40 minutes and it's a rough draft. Now, if you were coming to me and saying, hey, I have a 20-page paper due tomorrow, no, you would not do a closed thesis, but that's besides the point. A closed thesis is when you have the main ideas in it. Like it's like, oh, I'm going to talk about this. An open thesis is much more broad. It's harder to do. And if you have gotten the thesis point all year from your teacher, please do not stress about a closed or open thesis. The thesis point on the exam, anywhere from 92 to 98% of students earn that point. Like seriously, it's easy. And I don't mean to minimize it. It's just that quite literally, if you have a defensible claim, they give you the point. So don't stress about the thesis. Tips for SAQ. SAQ, do you mean FRQ? Because I think SAQ is like the history stuff. Can we use fallacies? So I don't even teach my students the fallacies. I'm going to be honest. Because I don't encourage you to go looking for fallacies, because a lot of the passages, in my opinion, don't have them. Just my opinion. Like I have yet to really see one where I was like, oh, that's a like a bandwagon argument. So I don't teach that. So yeah, if you're like, I don't get logical fallacies, that's okay. Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad y'all appreciate it. Oh, my neck just popped. I don't know if y'all can even hear that on the live, but if I ever like move my head, it's because my neck gets really tight. So I'm trying to stretch it out. I'm sorry. Multiple choice advice. Use process of elimination. Read the surrounding sentences. Make sure you're pacing yourself because sometimes students like have to rush at the end. And a lot of people are actually really good at the writing questions. And so if you rush on those, you might be shortchanging yourself some points. So don't linger on any one particular question because quite frankly, they're literally all worth 1 point. The hardest question, the easiest question, 1 point. So answer everything, even if it's a guess, but don't spend like 5 minutes on one question. So someone asked, what is Space Cat? Space Cat is an acronym that someone came up with. The previous one was Soapstone. So if your teacher uses Soapstone, they're basically the same thing. Space Cat, the space part of Space Cat. So speaker, purpose, audience, context, exigence. That is the rhetorical situation. It's like all these little puzzle pieces that work together to create the passage. So speaker, you need to know who are they? What are their credentials? This is usually provided in the prompt. And ask yourself, what do they need, believe, or value? Because that's going to influence their speech or their passage, right? For purpose, why did they write it? Or why are they speaking? What is their goal? What do they hope to accomplish? For audience, who are they? Is it one person? Is it a group of people? Sometimes for a speech, this is usually told to you in the prompt. But if it's like an article or something, you have to ask yourself, okay, what group are they most likely assuming is going to read this? Is it teachers? Is it parents? Is it millennials? Is it boomers? Is it like, I don't know, who is it? Right? Because the audience is not everyone. Got to narrow it down. Ask yourself what the audience needs, believes, or values. And is that the same as what the speaker needs, believes, and values? Like, are they having a friendly relationship or is it hostile or tense? For context means the historical context. So what is happening locally, nationally, or globally at the time? It can be like previous years, something that's influencing it. It could be what's going on at the time. And sometimes you can even think, okay, in the future, this happens. So context, that's context. Context and exigence equal occasion. So if you're a soapstone person, when we say context and exigence, that's the occasion. Exigence is like the catalyst. If you have never heard the word exigence before, listen up, please, because they might put the word exigence on an MCQ question. So if you're like, I've never heard exigence, it is the catalyst. It is literally like the reason why. Thank you so much for the roses, by the way. It is the reason why the person is speaking or writing. Okay, so like the exigence could be that let's say they received a letter and they are responding to the letter. The exigence is they received a letter. Like, why are they writing? Well, they received a letter. Let's say they were invited to speak at a convention. That's the exigence. Let's say that there's a tragedy that's happened and the president has to speak. Okay. Well, then that would be the tragedy would be the exigence. So that's what exigence is. Okay, let's see. I know I'm like jumping around. Thank you so much. All right. Trying to get these gift goals in because it's just kind of fun. So I appreciate it. Okay, the questions are going so fast. If I stare at the screen for a second, it's because I'm trying to read them and they're coming in so quickly. What order for the essays? Most people start with synthesis. I would say that's a good idea if you want to get it done with because it's kind of overwhelming. I would say put the essay, like prioritize your strengths. So if you're like, I'm terrible at argument, do that one last. If you're like, ooh, I'm really good, equally good at all of them, but if you get to the exam and you're like, ooh, that argument prompt looks hard, save the hard one for last, whatever the hard one is for you. It's relative. So like my students, there's like 3 different groups. Most of my students are doing synthesis, rhetorical, argument. A handful are doing synthesis, argument, rhetorical, and then like 2 of them are doing rhetorical, synthesis, argument. So they all got to pick what order they wanted to do. Basic explanation of a synthesis essay. It is a mini research paper. So you are given a topic. It might be one you're familiar with. It might not be. If you're not familiar with it, they usually define it and you can kind of figure it out from the sources, like what it is, right? So they give you a topic. They tell you a little bit about the topic, like a quick little paragraph. You have to use 3 sources. They give you 6. The maximum you'll get is 8. Usually it's 6. They give you 6 sources. You have to use at least 3 of the sources as evidence to prove your argument. So we want to read and hear your voice in here. Don't summarize the sources. Just make sure that you're using the sources as evidence. So it's like basically a research paper. Okay, let's see. Is it true that the College Board looks at essays as a draft? Yes. We, as readers, we're told to view them as a rough draft. They're not supposed to be perfect. Can you name some rhetorical devices that are common? Repetition, allusion, anecdote, comparison, contrast, call to action. I also have a video. If you type in Coach Hall writes most common rhetorical devices, I made this video like literally like this night before the 2020 AP test. I think I published it at like 8 a.m. or no, the test starts at 8 a.m. I published it at like 6 a.m. Like people were like watching it because like I was getting so many requests. So that video is still up. I need to redo it and make it more contemporary, but that video does have some good tips. Also remember that a rhetorical choice can be something that is like what they're doing. So we really want to use strong verbs, presents, acknowledges, justifies, flatters, if they're actually flattering the audience, whatever you think they're doing, like rallies the crowd, all of these things can be a choice. Can you explain the difference between exigence and purpose? Okay, so exigence is the catalyst. It's like the immediate cause of why they're writing. So let's use Bush's 9/11 speech because a lot of people read that one in class. The exigence is 9/11. That is the immediate reason that he's speaking. We're gonna that's just kind of it, right? So the purpose, though, is to, number one, comfort a grieving nation, and number two, let those responsible know that we're coming for them, essentially, right? So that you can have more than one purpose. Like sometimes there's a purpose in the beginning and then there's a shift and there's a purpose at the end. So the purpose is, what is his goal? Well, his goal is to comfort and ultimately to like call people to action, right? But the exigence was, hey, we were attacked. Okay, so that's the difference. Help with argumentative, really make sure that you choose specific evidence. So give like 2 to 3 sentences where you explain the evidence. Pretend you're explaining it to somebody who's like 10. Use like higher level words, like you're talking to your AP Lang teacher. But if you've ever had to explain to like a little kid something, like who somebody is, give us all those details. So tell us who the person is, what their credentials are, tell us the backstory concisely. To give us those specifics, because here's the thing. The AP readers are all different ages. We're from all different parts of the country. And so like, we might not know what you're talking about. So if you just drop a name and it's like, I'm trying to choose somebody who's kind of like, okay, like at one point, Selena and Haley Bieber were all over TikTok. Well, not all AP Lang teachers and readers are on TikTok. So if you said Haley and Selena, I know what happened, right? For the most part, sort of. However, just because I know it doesn't mean that I can be like, oh, this must be their point. You have to tell me. I can only go by the information on the page. Now, let's say somebody reading your paper is not on TikTok. They have zero clue about those two people. Let's say they're like pushing 70. They don't know. You have to explain it in a way that they're going to know because they can't infer, right? So give us, in an argument essay, give us the context and the backstory so that we understand. And then you need the commentary. That's going to be like, why is it significant? So like, why does it matter? Even if you're talking about somebody super famous, like Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, somebody like that, you still have to explain it to us as if we don't know who they are. How do you develop your commentary? Quick tips: use the word because or the phrase in order to or possibly since. Use verbs like underscores, which means emphasizes, highlights, suggests, showcases. So like basically forms of because and then shows. That's like quick tips. Thank you, Nadine. Other tips for commentary, it really kind of depends on which essay we're talking about, but for rhetorical analysis, the goal is going to be to connect your choices to the message, argument, or purpose. So really make sure that you're telling us like how the choice helps them convey their message. Like, what is their message? Tomorrow on rhetorical analysis, please, in both paragraphs and your thesis, explicitly tell us what the message, argument, or purpose is. Don't just say, oh, it helps them achieve their message. What's the message? You also want to analyze specific words and details in rhetorical analysis. That can really help as well. And so in your commentary, if you're telling us like why they use a certain word, that can be really helpful. Is it better to use more than 3 sources? Not necessarily. There's no like bonus points or anything. A lot of my students use 4 because it's kind of like a safety net. So like in case they forget to cite one, they at least have 3. But also like sometimes there's just 4 that kind of go together. That's not guaranteed, but you can use the sources however you want to fit your argument. So definitely have at least 3, but it's not like some of the AP history classes where like you get an extra point or something, I think. If you use like 6 of the 7 sources or something like that, we don't have that kind of bonus point. So don't try to cram in all 6. Like I've had students be like, "Oh, I used all 6." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." But like if that doesn't really help your argument. So don't cram them all in there just because you think it's going to help your case. Okay. Is it okay to write only 2 body paragraphs? Absolutely. Some people do 3. I say choose quality over quantity. So really develop them. Because if you're developing it super well, it's actually kind of hard to do 3 sometimes, just depending on the circumstances. What should your synthesis intro include? Worst case scenario, just a thesis, but usually you want to try to explain like what the issue is. So we see a lot of like, some people think this and some people think this. We also see a lot of like, insert topic here is very prevalent today. So like, if you know outside knowledge about your synthesis topic and you want to include it, great. But like, if you don't have that outside knowledge, just kind of give us a sentence or 2 plus your thesis. You'll be fine. Tips for argument, essay, evidence. Choose specific examples. Choose stuff that you can write about well. It doesn't have to be the smartest example ever. Just choose stuff that you can write about well. My teacher made us do a more sophisticated thesis throughout the year, but I feel like it's too hard for me. Is it possible to get the sophistication point with like with a less sophisticated thesis? Yeah, first of all, sophistication has to be consistent throughout the whole essay. So you can write the world's best thesis. If the rest of your essay is not good, you're not getting the sophistication point. So yeah, I would say if you are struggling to write like a super complicated thesis, like don't stress about that tomorrow. Just write a thesis. Can you get a 6 score with 2 body paragraphs? Yes, you can. It happens all the time. So don't stress about, like, it has to be well-developed body paragraphs. Like they have to genuinely be proving your point. Plenty of commentary, but absolutely, yes, you can. Okay, what if we blank and cannot think of evidence for argument? You got to choose something. Try to think about, I would say, narrow it down to like personal experience. Is there anything that you can write about in your own life? Because yes, you can write about personal experience. If you are pretty knowledgeable about history, look into history. Think about that. Current events, if you're good at that, or just outside knowledge. As teenagers, you have unique skill sets. So write about what you know. If the only thing that comes to mind is the movie Moana, then by golly, make it work. If it fits the prompt, like tell us who Moana is, tell us like what happens, and then give us some commentary. So just lean into whatever ideas do come to you. Sometimes it helps to kind of do like a brain dump and just write down stuff, and then like as you look at it, kind of eliminate the ideas that are not so good. Yeah, you can write about sports. I actually love reading essays about sports. I have had students write about like Simone Biles. There was this other one that I had them research. I think it's Carrie Shrug. It's this lady, girl who, back in like 96 had to like do a vault, with a broken foot. And back then she was like praised for it. Super famous. They would show her in a whole bunch of Olympics commercials for like years to come. And then this year, around the time Simone Biles was having some struggles with mental health, a lot of people were like, wow, like we were praising this girl for essentially completing a vault on a broken foot. We should have been looking out for her health. Like, what were we thinking? And so I've had students write about like gymnasts. I've had students write about Cheer, the Netflix documentary, Dance Moms. So write about what you know. just go for it. What if you can't find any rhetorical devices? First of all, use this strategy. Ask yourself, what are they doing? Okay, you don't need fancy words for it. Are they identifying a problem? Cool, write about it. Are they acknowledging a situation? Cool, write about it. And so you don't need like all these devices per se. Just ask yourself what they're doing and use that. Other thing is word choice and tone are in everything. So at the very least, you've got word choice and tone. Can we bring highlighters? Unfortunately, no, you can't. The only thing you can have with you is, you can bring a watch as long as it's not a smartwatch. You can bring pencils for the MCQ, not mechanical pencils. I don't know why. Something about the ink, or the lead. Sorry, not ink. So number 2 pencils, and you can have blue and black ink pens for the FRQs. So like I have had students bring like one blue ink and one black ink, and they kind of color coded that way because they couldn't highlight. So yeah. Yeah, you can't have something that's like something that's gonna beep, and apparently no stopwatches or whatever. Okay, let's see. My teacher claims that in the thesis for the rhetorical analysis, focus on the purpose and elaborate on the choices in the body paragraph. In the rubric, it says that your thesis has to have choices. It does not say, and this is frustrating for teachers, it does not say that your thesis has to have purpose. Now, I like to see choices and purpose. So do many readers. But technically, your thesis is the choices. So if you were to just tell me something about like the writer gives this speech in order to motivate the crowd, that is not a thesis. I could not give you the point for that. Now, in theory, what I would do is I would go to your conclusion if you had one, and I would see if you have a thesis there. If you don't, then I would look at your topic sentences. And if you have like choices in your topic sentences, then that's what I would do. That's where you could get the point. So, your thesis is supposed to have rhetorical choices in it. It's nice to have the purpose. There are 2 different types. There is the paper test, which is what most students are doing. And then there is the digital test. Schools got to choose. Yes, I'm an AP reader. I've been an AP reader for the last 2 years. I'll be going to Tampa for the AP reading this year. I've also helped, our state has a mock exam. So I've helped on that for like probably 7 years or more. They start to blur together after a while. Like some of my very first AP Lang students are like now going to like graduating grad school or and stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. It seems like you were in my class just yesterday. Thank you for the advice. You're so welcome. Good luck tomorrow. Yes, if it is late in your time zone, because let me see. It's about to be 10 p.m. here, and I'm on Central Time. So if you're on the East Coast, please go to bed. Try to get good sleep. Make sure you have alarm set for tomorrow. Pack your bag in advance. I recommend wearing comfy clothes, like because you're gonna be sitting there for like almost 4 hours. At least it's gonna feel like that. So, yes. Your dream minor is creative writing. I was an English creative writing person. I have a master's in creative writing. I don't really use it per se, but I did study it. East Coast. Some of you are on West Coast. So some of you have some time. Comfy clothes is the best advice. Yeah, seriously. Some people like dress up. I mean, if it's your style, that's cool. But like, if I were taking the test tomorrow, I would be wearing like sweatpants and stuff because like you're gonna be sitting there so long. Good night, Zoe. I'm gonna cry for this exam. Here's the thing, like a little bit of a pep talk, y'all. The exam might be hard, but do not like dismiss your abilities, because I've had it where like a student has been like, I'm convinced I got a 2, I'm terrible. And they ended up getting like a 3 or a 4. So like, don't just assume that you're going to fail. Keep going, like have that grit, have that perseverance. But like, if it's hard for you, it's probably hard for everybody else too. Look at my comments. Okay, there's so many. I'll scroll for a little bit and see if I can find them. My teacher said not to write about personal experience. Well, you can though. Like it's allowed. In fact, some of the old prompts used to actually tell you that you could. It is totally fine to write about personal experience. Is it okay to call out a fallacious argument while writing the rhetorical analysis? It's rare that there's gonna be one, so I wouldn't go looking for fallacies. Because it's just That's really not what they want you to be doing, in my opinion. All right. Oh, essay format or layout. Format or layout. So like they're going to be presented in synthesis, rhetorical analysis, argument. You can write them in any order. Each essay is going to need an intro. It can be as small as just a thesis. If you are pressed for time, just write a thesis. 2 to 3 body paragraphs. You can do 2, you can do 3. And then a conclusion is nice but not necessary. Who is they? I was either talking about readers or the College Board. I don't know what I said when I said they, so I was probably talking about readers or the College Board. Can you please answer my question? Sweetheart, I will try my very best, but there are 363 people watching on TikTok, and I don't even know how many on YouTube, so I'm going as quickly as I can. And quite frankly, a lot of these are the same questions, so I'm trying as best I can. But by you writing, can you please answer my question? I saw that comment, but I didn't see your other question. Is there sentence frames for synthesis essays? There are. I have a video for that since you are asking on YouTube. Let me put that link in the chat for you. Sorry, I got to move this. Actually, it's probably better if I move it this way. All right, let's see. Synthesis video for sentence frames. I have a sentence frames video for rhetorical analysis as well. I actually think the rhetorical analysis sentence frames are better. But here is the one in the YouTube chat, I believe, for synthesis. Okay. Thank you for following. After the AP test, I will, this summer, I'll be doing some college application content. So if you're a junior, don't just automatically unfollow just because I'm an AP Lang person. This summer, I would be happy to help with college application stuff if you are a junior as a rising senior. Let's see. You said you don't have to put the quote in prompt 3. You don't need to refer to it at all. Just refer to the topic. So if the topic is like last year, it was timely decisions, then you don't need to say Colin Powell once said this. Just talk about the value of timely decisions. If you're a little confused on that, go look at some recent prompts and sample essays, because some people do. Some people say Colin Powell once said, but you don't have to. Can you explain the rhetorical situation? The rhetorical situation, I like to think of it kind of like a puzzle. There are about 6 pieces. There's going to be the speaker, the purpose, the audience, context, exigence, and then technically argument or message is part of it too. So basically it's a situation from which the text arises. It's all these like factors or components that you have to consider as you're analyzing a passage. And sometimes some of them are more prominent than others. What are some good tone words for rhetorical analysis? A lot of my students use passionate as like an insert tone word here. So passionate, matter of fact. If they're being like really direct, you could say matter of fact or frank, or forthright. If they're being bold, bold could work, bold or forthright. Just don't say like positive or negative, because that's not really like a tone. Everyone cramming the night before the exam. I know. I love it. I love that y'all are like trying to get last minute questions answered, because it shows that you care. What are some good transition words? Therefore, thus, furthermore, moreover, consequently, subsequently. Those are some of the like easiest ones to use. Is a counter argument paragraph necessary? It's not required, no. So only do it if you think it's going to help. Can you recommend strong words other than shows or says? So instead of says, try asserts or argues or claims, things like that. Instead of shows, you could do showcases. That's a step up. Emphasizes, underscores, which means emphasizes. I always say it that way because a lot of people don't know what underscores means. And so it's just like a teacher thing. I want you to know that underscores means emphasizes. So I say them both. Because underscores is sometimes in the multiple choice. I'm going to laugh if there is it doesn't mean it's right. But if you take the test tomorrow and one of the answer choices has something about underscores and you're like, Coach Hall said it means emphasizes, at least you now know. Highlights, suggests, reveals can be helpful for shows. So yeah, those are some words that can help. Instead of uses, Okay, so a lot of people are like, "Oh, I do utilizes or employees." That's kind of the same thing. Instead of saying uses, like uses comparison, turn the noun into a verb. So instead of uses comparison, say compares. Instead of saying uses repetition, say repeats. I think I have a really old video from like 3 years ago about how to avoid uses. But basically take the noun and turn it into a verb. So like not all nouns do this, like anecdote, there's no verb. But what you could say instead of saying uses an anecdote, which isn't terrible, is you could say recalls a time when or reminisces on. Because if someone says, oh, the speaker recalls a time when, I know they're giving an anecdote. Mm. Yes, thank you all for answering each other's questions as well. Are you doing a session at 6 a.m.? The problem is if I did a session at 6 a.m., it would probably be a get ready with me because I will be getting ready for work at that time. And like, listen, I love y'all, but I am not the type of content creator that can do a get ready with me. Like, y'all do not need to see me trying to barely put on makeup in the morning. Is your thesis supposed to be nouns or verbs? It's better if it's verbs, but if you do nouns, you can still get the point. As long as it's like a device or a choice, it's fine. I just looked how to write a synthesis essay and I'm so confused. Okay, so a synthesis essay is like a mini research paper. So they're going to give you a topic and they're going to give you 6 to 8 sources. You need to pick a side, okay? And then you're going to use at least 3 of the sources to help you prove your argument. So you're probably going to have a thesis that tells which side you're on. Then you're going to have 2 or 3 body paragraphs. And those are going to have a different main idea each. And then you're going to put ideally 2 sources per body paragraph if you can. If you're doing 3, then you can like 3 body paragraphs. You might do like 2, 1, 1 or something like that. If you're doing 2 body paragraphs, it might be 2 and 2. It might be 1 and 2, something like that. But try to have at least 1 body paragraph with 2 sources in it. Okay. So you're just going to use the sources as the evidence, and then you're going to provide commentary. I have a video on how to write a synthesis essay. I don't know if it will help you, but for the people that are saying, oh, I've never had to do this before, or I don't know how to do it, I have a few videos on my YouTube channel where I break it down for you. Can point of view be used as a rhetorical strategy? That's more of an AP Lit thing, if I'm being honest. You can talk about, like, for instance, if they're saying like we and us and our, you could call that like inclusive diction. Or some people say pronoun use. It sounds better if you say, in my opinion, if you say inclusive diction. But like, because it's nonfiction, it's usually first person. So actual point of view is going to be more of an AP Lit thing. Okay, so yeah, you have approximately 40 minutes per essay to save time on pacing if you're worried about pacing. Short intro, worst case scenario, just a thesis, 2 body paragraphs, develop them well, and then you don't technically need a conclusion. So that's like worst case scenario. If you're struggling with pacing, that would be what I would recommend. The other thing is if you're struggling with pacing, go into it with a plan. So try to outline in advance, because I know it seems counterintuitive because you're like, well, I want to save all my time. Why would I plan? That's wasting time. But basically you want to make sure that you have a plan so that you can write more quickly. You don't want to get stuck halfway through and realize, oh, I should have picked the other side, or I don't know what to write next. So jot down some bullet points, like a quick outline. Yeah, they recommend 40 minutes per essay and you get a 15-minute reading period. For synthesis, for those that struggle with choosing evidence, look for facts, statistics, real world examples. So if they're like, oh, here's an example from Central Park or something, I don't know. If they like, look for those. And then expert testimony. So anytime they're quoting somebody who's knowledgeable on the topic. So like if your topic has to do with education and they're quoting a teacher, like that person's technically an expert. We're ready. That's awesome. I'm so excited for y'all. Just like tomorrow, do the very best you can. One thing I would say is please use all your time for essays. Like some people finish. Oh, thank you for the rose, Jonathan. Some people finish their multiple choice early and like, that's okay. But like the FRQs use all your time. There's always more you can write. How do I prepare for MCQ. I didn't practice. If you studied for like the SAT or ACT already this year, chances are some of that you studied will overlap. I don't know if there's a ton of ways for you to actually study for the MCQ the night before. I do have a video on my YouTube channel about tips and stuff. So that might help you, but oh, you haven't taken the SAT or the ACT? Search for Coach Hall Writes MCQ Tips. It's a video that I published about a month ago. It has a white thumbnail with like blue writing on it. That video might help. But yeah, it's a little hard to like actually study for MCQ because like the passages change. Should you put the exigence in the intro? If it's relevant, then yes. You want to try to clarify what the rhetorical situation is. How do you effectively create layers of evidence for rhetorical analysis? So you want to try to ask yourself, like, what short quotes can I use to prove my point? So let's say it's an anecdote. Okay, and there's only one. So you might be thinking, okay, well, I can only put one quote. No, if they're telling a story, you can pull short quotes from different parts of the anecdote and kind of weave it into your sentence. So make sure that you're choosing shorter quotes, and that can really help. I have a YouTube video about how to write a rhetorical analysis body paragraph. I think someone asked this question on YouTube, so hold on. Let me see if I can find that video. This is a little bit older of a video. I can tell because I changed my, I went through different phases of like the thumbnails and fonts and stuff. So this one's a little bit older. But for the person who was asking about like layering, I think this video that I just put might help if I remember correctly. I hope I chose the right one. Thank you for the roses. How do you figure out the exigence? So like ask yourself what the immediate reason is, like why they're speaking. So, or writing. So what happened basically? Like, were they invited? Are they responding to a recent event? Like why are they talking in the first place? Like what prompted them to talk? How many paragraphs do you need for each essay and intro? Ideally 2 to 3 body paragraphs, and then a conclusion if it is like if you have time. What not to do. So what not to do is like one of the things that's going to hurt your score is number 1, not having 3 sources on synthesis. Number 2, having not enough commentary. Commentary is super important. Is there always a clear exigence? Honestly, like, no. Like, I mean, there's some passages where it's a little bit like I wouldn't stress about it. If they're going to, on the multiple choice, they might ask you about the exigence, but if they do, it's going to be because the exigence should be pretty clear. Do all 3 sources have to support your claim? You can use one of them as like a counter argument and like refute it, if that's what you're asking. How do you get sophistication for argument? Usually because you're like having some kind of nuanced argument. Exigence is the reason, like what's prompting them to speak. So like, were they invited to a convention? That's the exigence. Did something happen, like a tragedy, and it's like a president responding to it? The tragedy that they're responding to is the exigence, that kind of thing. So commentary is the why. So you want to ask yourself, why is this evidence significant? What does it show us? And you want to, for rhetorical analysis, you want to talk about how it helps them convey their message, argument, or purpose. For synthesis and argument, it's more of thinking about like what the example shows, like what's the lesson, how does it apply to the real world, like why does it matter? So those are some things for commentary. For commentary, thank you for the likes on TikTok, by the way. For commentary, try to use a synonym for shows if you get stuck, like illustrates, highlights, suggests, things like that. And then also use the word because you want to keep asking yourself why. All right, let's see. Common rhetorical devices, repetition, word choice, comparison, contrast, anecdotes, allusion, call to action. Those are some of the more common ones. Also know that you can use strong verbs like presents, identifies, justifies, acknowledges, things like that. Most common mistakes we see: lack of commentary. For the students that genuinely try, because some people just literally don't write the essays, which is kind of frustrating. But for the students who are trying, the biggest mistake that we see is just not enough commentary. So like either they only put like a sentence of commentary after their evidence and they could have said a whole lot more, or they maybe said more sentences, but like they never really connected it back to the prompt. Like they were close, but they just didn't really get there. So commentary is kind of the important thing. If you're trying to study tonight, I would say look at some previous essays from past exams that have gotten good scores. So like a 4 out of 6 or higher. Because you can, if you type in AP Lang past exam prompts, you can read some of the old prompts and see them. What's the difference between allusion and a metaphor? Allusion is when you reference something famous that most people will know, and a metaphor is just when you compare it to unlike things without using like or as. So for instance, if I said like, oh, that's a David and Goliath situation, that would be a biblical allusion because most people, though not all people, but most people are somewhat familiar with the story of David and Goliath. If I said the person has like a Mona Lisa smile, most people are sort of familiar with what the Mona Lisa looks like and how she's kind of smirking, like it's not really a big smile. So that would tell you could kind of visualize what the person's smile looks like. So an allusion is like a comparison in some sense because you're referencing something that people are familiar with. Connotation is the like, it's hard to explain kind of, but it's like there's denotation, which is the dictionary definition, and connotation is like the feeling that you get from the word. Like, for instance, the word love has different connotations to different people. Like we could all Google what love is, and like that's the denotation, the dictionary definition. But like love means different things to different people, so it has different connotations. So words can have a positive or a negative connotation, or they can be neutral. I'm scared. You're going to do just fine. Just try your best. I know it's really hard. If you're nervous or scared, it means it's important to you. And that's a good thing at this point. Yeah, you can. Yeah, someone wrote there about their college applications because it was relevant to the prompt. Yeah, you can write about a lot of things. Let's see. Is it good to use 3 pieces of evidence for each essay and add a 4th if there's enough time? It kind of depends. I would say for rhetorical analysis and synthesis, usually it helps if you have 2 pieces of evidence per paragraph. For argument, 1 or 2 pieces of evidence per paragraph. If you've got like one really solid example, that's fine. Or you can like have 2 related examples per paragraph. And the reason why I say 2 is because you can kind of layer it. Because if you think about it, sometimes 2 pieces of evidence per point is going to be more convincing than 1 if you develop it well. All right. Y'all might hear a weird sound as I pour my water. How do I get better with my commentary? Keep asking yourself, why does this matter? And also think about like, why is this significant? Because your commentary has to explain your evidence. By the way, I'm drinking Propel in case anyone's curious. It's just water. Not sponsored, obviously, because I'm a high school English teacher. But with commentary, you want to ask yourself, like, why did I choose this evidence? Like, what does it show? How does it prove my point? And I think that's the thing that people miss is like they choose evidence, but they don't actually think about why they chose it. And so their commentary kind of falls flat. Tips on the sophistication point. I have a video on this that's actually, I think, pretty good for rhetorical analysis if you're looking for that specifically. I would say for rhetorical analysis, search for Coach Hall writes rhetorical analysis sophistication point, and it should pop up. I have a few videos about that. You want to really think about like why the speaker made this choice for this audience on this occasion, like really connect to the rhetorical situation or analyze the tension and complexities. You can earn the point because of style, but that's like the most rare. We don't see that people earn it for that reason as much. If I qualify for a synthesis essay, do I write 2 paragraphs that support my point and 1 that I can concede? Yeah, you can. That's one strategy for it, for sure. A lot of people do that. They'll do like 2 paragraphs and then they'll do like a counter argument type of paragraph. You don't have to though. Please know that you do not have to address the counter argument. Let's see. Should you use this is significant because or be more you can. Like there's other ways to say it probably better, but like at least if you say this is significant because at least you're trying for commentary. And sometimes in the moment that's all you can think of. Like you're writing a rough draft under stress, so like, we get it. Do you think we should write our rhetorical analysis essay paragraphs in beginning, middle, and end? Yeah, I think you should try to follow it in chronological order. The speaker begins by making this choice, they continue by making this choice, they conclude by making this choice. So if you intend to do 3 body paragraphs, I would do it in chronological order. If you're going to do 2, that's fine. Still do something that happens early on and something that happens at the end. Let's see. Is a hook necessary? No, it is not. How do you incorporate sources into argumentative without citing things? So the sources are for the synthesis essay, not the argument essay. And in the synthesis, you should cite things. How much evidence is adequate for the argument essay? At least 1 major example per paragraph. Some people like to do 2 examples per paragraph. Which essay should you write first? Most people start with synthesis because it's the most time consuming. And then I would say consider that, but mostly prioritize your strongest essays. Put your weakest essay last. Because if you're going to rush something, rush your weakest essay. Should you cite it as the quote author? Yes. The way you wrote it in your comment on TikTok, yes. So you put the citation at the end of the sentence. So it's like you have your words, you have your quote, maybe some more words, and then your citation. So the citation, if there's words after the quote, the citation goes at the end of the sentence. I have a video on YouTube. I have 2 of them. One's longer, one's shorter, about how to cite things. Thank you for sharing the live, and thank you all for the likes. All right, let's see. YouTube questions. What are some typical argument essay prompts? A lot of them lately have been kind of open-ended and philosophical. The value of insert topic here. Is it hard to get a 5 out of 6 on the essays? It's not easy, but it's not hard. It depends on your writing ability, and it also depends on the prompt itself. Can you explain what qualifies as a good thesis statement for each essay? So for rhetorical analysis, the most important thing is they look for rhetorical choices. We like to see rhetorical choices plus the message, argument, or purpose. So the speaker does this and this in order to. For synthesis and argument, make sure that you're choosing like the phrasing of the prompt and actually answering the question. So if they say like, what is the role of whatever, you could say, or what is the value of whatever the topic is, you could literally say like, topic is valuable because, and then like give us 2 or 3 reasons. Like, does it lead to personal growth? Does it lead to innovation? Like why is it valuable? So use the language from the prompt. Like don't carbon copy everything that they provide you, but use the language of the prompt. So if I don't know what the prompt is going to be about, let's say it's about courage. If it says assert a position on the value of courage, you have to include the word courage in your thesis. I would include the phrase value of courage or something about like it's valuable or beneficial or something so that we know what you're talking about. How long should each essay be? Intro, 2 body paragraphs, maybe 3. Conclusions not necessary. Your intro should be really short. As far as page length, this is not actually what your pages will look like tomorrow. This is the old AP paper. Okay, when I see an essay that goes from here to here, and then you flip it over, I don't know why I had to actually flip it because it looks the same, and it's like here and it stops here, I get worried it's short. So if it's like a page and a half, I get nervous. I like to see at least a page and at least a whole other page. And then like, if you can go on to the next paper, that's even better. Now, just because it's long does not mean that it's a good essay. I once read a 5-page paper. It was not one of my students, but I read a 5-page paper where the student got like essentially a 3 out of 6 because they just rambled. On your paper tomorrow, okay, so this is the old paper. It has this little like box. You're not going to have a box. You're going to have bubbles. So it's going to say question 1, question 2, question 3, and you just bubble in which question you're answering. Do reasons need to be stated in the thesis? It's helpful if they are. That's kind of like the closed thesis thing that we were talking about earlier. I just feel like it helps like the reader know, okay, here's what I'm going to prove. And I think it helps the students too, because it helps you like stay focused. Will we be able to annotate? Yes. Especially for like on the digital, there's a different way to annotate. I'm not as familiar with that one. But on the actual test, yes, you can write in your booklet. Can you paraphrase for the rhetorical? Yes, but you should have some direct quotes, in my opinion. Don't only paraphrase, because when you only paraphrase, it kind of sometimes sounds like a summary. So make sure you include a couple quotes, short quotes, not long quotes. Structure of a synthesis essay. So same thing, intro with a thesis, 2 to 3 body paragraphs, conclusion if you have time. You do not have to address the counter argument, but you can if you want to. My teacher always told us to write 3. A lot of teachers say that in theory, not a lot, but like some people tell their students that you can score just fine with 2 well-developed body paragraphs. What's the structure for refuting? So like you can do a counterclaim and rebuttal, where you say like opponents of the topic think this, or like some people argue that, and you explain what they argue, and then you basically have to refute it. So you have to say, however, they fail to consider, like basically tell why they're wrong. You can also do something called a concession and refutation. So a concession is when you acknowledge the merit of the other side. So you're like, yes, it's true that, and then you refute it and you say, however, we really need to think about this. So that's one way to do it. Let's see. Can your intro just contain a thesis? Yes, we see a lot of that. We actually see a lot of people who just write a thesis to save time. It's totally fine. Can you fit 3 pieces of evidence or 2 devices in 2 paragraphs? Technically, yeah. Sophistication point, go check out the YouTube videos on my channel for that one. I'm not trying to dismiss your question. I've just addressed it a few times, and it's like a very complicated topic to really address. So that one is probably better if you search Coach Hall writes, especially if you want rhetorical analysis. Coach Hall writes sophistication point rhetorical analysis. If you do that, it'll pop up. Oh, thank you so much, Ian. Ian, if you have a question, please feel free to type it in the chat and I will do my best to answer it. Thank you for your gift. MCQ tips, basically just make sure that you are pacing so that you have time to finish, answer every question, read the surrounding sentences. Don't get hung up on like words that you don't know. Some people like to read the questions first for the reading ones. So that's the first 2 passages. And that can sometimes help because you're reading with a purpose. I have a video on my channel from like a month ago about MCQ tips, and it's like much more detailed. So feel free to watch that video. Is it okay to say you? Try not to, because it means you're kind of directly addressing your audience, and we don't really want to do that. So when you say you, you're probably actually meaning like people or like society or individuals. So don't say you, say like people or individuals or something like that. I need help with commentary. For those looking for help with commentary, for rhetorical analysis especially, I have a video called My Best Tip for Rhetorical Analysis. I'll put it in the YouTube chat. I think that video can really help you kind of know what to do to strengthen your rhetorical analysis commentary. So I think it's this link right here. I'll put it in the chat in YouTube. What's the difference between the reading and the writing MCQ? Okay, so the reading is going to be the first 2 passages are reading. They're long passages and they have a lot more questions. So there's like 10 to 13. This is going to be stuff that's already been published. We don't know what time period it'll be from. It could be older, it could be contemporary. We don't know. And so those questions are ones where you're going to be asked, like, what is the function of the paragraph? Or like, what is the purpose of the passage? Or what does this word mean? So that's the reading questions. The writing questions are like editing questions. So those are the ones where they give you a short passage. So passage 3, 4, and 5 are going to be short. It's going to say this is a draft at the top. And there's going to be 5 to 8 questions. And so for those, basically, they're like, should the writer add this sentence? Yes or no? Should the writer delete this sentence? Yes or no? Things like that. Transition words, that's kind of common as well. Okay, Ian. So my teacher taught us to use the rhetorical précis and then have an open thesis. Am I able to use a closed thesis? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, most students do. A rhetorical précis, for those who don't know, it's kind of like this template. Um, and there's nothing wrong with it, but sometimes they're a little time consuming, if I'm being honest. So if you feel like you are used to writing a rhetorical précis and you can't do it quickly, that's okay. But you're right, you can have a closed thesis. So quite literally, you could just say, the writer does this and this in order to achieve this purpose. If you're curious about rhetorical analysis and thesis statements, I have a couple videos on my channel with sentence frames and examples. That might help. Yeah, the writing multiple choice is like the writing and language on the SAT, not the grammar stuff. They're not going to ask you about like colons and semicolons and stuff. Like as far as like um the ones where it's like one answer choice has a colon and one has a dash and one has a semicolon. It's not that kind. It's like the transition words and the reorganizing stuff. And then the reading multiple choice is very much like the reading SAT with the nonfiction passages. The only thing is they don't ask you about a graph. Like there's no, like on the SAT reading, there's graphs that you can analyze. There's none on this. The only time you'll see a graph on the AP Lang test is on the synthesis. And then there on the SAT, there's some questions where they're like, what's the best evidence for the previous question? They don't ask you that on AP Lang, to the best of my knowledge. I have looked at all the stuff on AP Classroom, haven't seen a what's the best evidence question. Let's see. Can you go over Q2 structure? So I would, for your intro, I would explain what the rhetorical situation is. So basically that's like what's the passage? And I would then have a thesis where you have your choices and purpose, or message, argument, or purpose. I would analyze chronologically. So your first body paragraph is going to pertain to something that's happening in the beginning of the text, what the choice is, why they're making that choice, why that choice is relevant to that audience on that occasion. Then your second body paragraph should be something from like the middle or the end of your speech, depending on if you're doing 2 or 3 body paragraphs. And so same kind of concept. We need a claim, evidence, commentary. I recommend another layer: evidence, commentary, concluding sentence. Now, you do not need a conclusion. If you're trying to write a rhetorical analysis conclusion instead of recapping your main points, there are 2 things I would encourage you to consider if you're trying to write a conclusion. Number 1 is this passage historically relevant? And if so, how? Because like, let's say they give you a passage from like World War I. We, generally speaking, most of us know how World War I ended up, right? So if you happen to have taken like APUSH or AP World and you know some like context for that, maybe tell us like the significance of it. Like if it's a president and you know more about that president and what happened, then lean into that in the conclusion, broader context. If they ask you about the message, then I would ask yourself, how is this message relevant today? So for instance, a couple years ago, actually last year, the prompt was about identity. The message was about identity. So basically, ask yourself, how is the message of identity relevant today? And you can situate it in a broader context as well. So that's some tips for rhetorical. Someone said College Board likes when you have source A at the end of the evidence versus at the beginning. Yes. So you don't want to say according to source A. It sounds better if you just integrate your quote into a sentence and put your parenthetical citation at the end. We also don't want to say this shows that. We want to like, it's not wrong, but it's better to be like, this statistic shows that, or this statistic demonstrates the value of whatever, because. So whenever you use the word this, try to put a noun after it, like this what. You're welcome. Let's see. I feel like I know I've skipped a bunch of questions. Someone said something about how do I come up with evidence in question 1 in a time crunch? Okay, in a time crunch, look for facts, statistics, because like the numbers are probably going to stand out to you. Real world examples, so like success stories or stories of failure or whatever. An expert testimony if they're quoting somebody who's like an expert. So if it's a topic of education and they quote a teacher, like you can usually tell when they're quoting people. That helps. Someone asked, what is a thesis? So the thesis is your overarching claim. It typically belongs in your intro, and you get a point for having a defensible thesis. So for synthesis and argument, you're going to want to take the wording of the prompt and kind of work it in. So if they ask you to assert a position on the value of something, you can say like, insert topic here, is beneficial because, and you could give us the reasons. That would be defensible. You could also do a counter argument thesis, which usually starts with the word although or while. So like, although some people think this, like, you know, although let's do the cursive writing prompt. Although cursive writing was once very popular in schools, it is an archaic practice that should not continue today. That would be a thesis. You could add in a because clause if you want to. Can argument be first person? You can include personal experience as evidence. Yes. Will you get marked off if you incorrectly describe historical stuff? It kind of depends on like what happens. So for instance, if you tell us like the wrong date or the wrong decade, we can't fact check you. So even if we know it's like wrong, like let's say you said it's the 50s and it's really the 60s, if that's the only thing wrong, then you're probably fine because it's just a little hiccup. But like if you have a bunch of inaccuracies, that's a different story. But if you just give us the wrong name, like for instance, one of my students was writing about Gabby Douglas, the gymnast. But she also is a huge fan of the TV show Cheer. And so she said Gabby Butler, who is a cheerleader. But everything in the paragraph was supposed to be about Gabby Douglas. And everything she said was true for Gabby Douglas. She just used the name Gabby Butler one time. So that would not impact the score. Because quite frankly, I knew the difference between Gabby Butler and Gabby Douglas, but like most AP readers might not. So yeah, if it's just like a little hiccup like that, not a big deal. And if you're worried about getting it wrong, like take a second to just kind of think, okay, wait a minute, like what did I learn about in history class? Like what decade was it? Or choose a different example if you're like super worried about it. Personal pronouns, don't say things like I think or I believe, but like you can use personal experience. Oh, thank you, Will. You can use personal experience. And if you're writing about personal experience, then like, yes, you can use personal pronouns because you really can't talk about personal experience without using personal pronouns. Thank you so much, Will. I greatly appreciate the roses and other gifts. How do you use personal anecdotes in your essay? I have a video about this. If you search for Coach Hall Writes How to Write About Personal Experience, if you want like more tips, first of all, you want to ask yourself, is it meaningful? Okay, because if it's not a meaningful experience, then you probably shouldn't be writing about it. So you want to choose something that is relevant to the topic. You need to tell us what happened and presumably how you grew from it. Because, for instance, like there's a prompt about competition. And I think in the video that I made about writing about personal experience, I talk about how I was the like jump rope champion in like first grade at my elementary school. Yeah, that was a competition. That was not a meaningful competition. Whereas I competed in sports in high school and college. So if I was to write about competition, I'm not going to talk about the jump rope contest that I won in first grade because literally nobody cares. It's not meaningful. But I could talk about a lot of the lessons I learned through competition in high school and stuff like that. And so basically make sure the experience that you're choosing is relevant and make sure that you tell 2 to 3 sentences to explain the backstory and then give 3 to 4 sentences to explain like the significance of it, to have your commentary. Common rhetorical strategies: repetition, allusion, anecdote, comparison, contrast, call to action, detail. Which essay should you do first? Most people start with synthesis, but I would consider that, but I would also prioritize your essays to put your weakest essay last. Can you make up evidence? They can't fact check you, so technically just make sure it's believable. Yeah, I know people have made up experience. In fact, one of my students last year made up a whole sibling. And this is my coworker's daughter. She made a 5 on the exam. I've known her since she was 7. She wrote about her sister. She doesn't have a sister. I need to ask her what she actually wrote about, like what the sister story was. She also wrote about Alexander Hamilton because her mom's a history teacher. Can you please tell me the 5 most important rhetorical devices? Yeah, so I just said some of the more common ones are, comparison, contrast, detail, anecdote, diction. Diction's in everything, and diction creates tone. Repetition is usually pretty common. Also, remember that you can use strong verbs. Like that's actually usually better. So make sure that you're using verbs like justifies, acknowledges, presents. Those verbs can be helpful as well. Thank you, Eduardo. I really appreciate the roses. What is an example of a paradox? I'll be really honest with you. I don't think they're going to ask you about that. I'm trying to think of one, like, because there's some famous paradoxes. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. It's like statements that like can't be there. They are true, but they can't be true at the same time or something. I really don't think they're going to ask you about a paradox. Someone said loud silence. Oh, as a paradox. Yeah, because like if someone's talking about how the silence is loud, like silence is supposed to be quiet. So yeah, that's a paradox. Or like or is that an oxymoron? That might be an oxymoron. It's still a good one though. So rhetorical choices are going to be verbs ideally. Anecdotes are an anecdote is like a short story, like when they tell a quick little story somewhere in their speech. Like when I was just talking about when I was talking about the jump rope contest from elementary school, if I had told the story of, well, when I was in first grade, and like that would be an anecdote because you're telling a story. Or if you're not sure if it's actually an anecdote, usually if you say example, it probably counts. Juxtaposition is contrast. It's like a fancy word for contrast. So you can say the verb juxtaposes. You can have either 2 or 3 body paragraphs, whichever one you're comfortable with. You can still score well with 2. All right, let's see. Would I cite the specific rhetorical choices in the second sentence of the rhetorical précis? See, I don't teach the rhetorical précis. I used to know it super well. I don't teach it because it was just a little bit too confusing and time consuming for students. I have a shorter thesis statement that I have them do, but you do want to kind of explain, okay, here's what's going on in the passage, just a couple sentences about that, and then give a thesis statement. I do have a couple older videos about how to write a rhetorical analysis intro where it's like not using a rhetorical précis. So if you're used to the rhetorical précis and you're trying to break from that, then those videos might help. It is fine if you don't have a conclusion. That's correct. 2 pieces of evidence are required. I would say recommended. They're not required. It doesn't say that they're required in the rubric, but recommended, yes. Can you use first person in synthesis? You can if it's part of your commentary. Like for instance, if they talk about something that's school related and you have personal experience that relates to it, yes, you can use that in your commentary. Just make sure that it's like related to the evidence that you just cited. Let's see. How do I incorporate literature into an argument essay? You can. It's not it's not a tactic that I recommend most people do. But if you are like, let's say you read Great Gatsby or something this year and it like, I don't know, it fits the prompt. I would say which book you're talking about. I would give like a very quick summary that explains like what we need to know for the example to make sense. And then kind of talk about like the big picture, like what it shows. So you can write about literature. It's just a lot of people don't because we want to stick to like nonfiction if possible. Are you allowed to skip between the writing and reading sections freely? So if you mean like MCQ, when you're doing the MCQ, you can only be doing MCQ, but you can go back and forth between the 45 questions however you want to. And then for the FRQ, you can write the essays in any order. What you can't do is if it's multiple choice time, you can't be writing an essay because like that's a whole separate test booklet. It's supposed to be like under your desk or something. And in the same regard, if it's essay time and you already finished the MCQ, you have like little stickers. You got to like seal them up. You can't go back to them. Yes, you can use pop culture. All right, let me try to do let's do this. I don't know if everybody can do it, but let's ask like for like the next like few minutes, let's ask yes or no questions. So that way I can answer them rapid fire. And then we'll go back to these like more detailed ones. Cause I feel like I'm skipping some of these like longer questions. So let me do like rapid fire. Do you have a structure sheet on each essay? I do, but it's not in a format that's easy to share with you all. Otherwise I would. Can you use quotes on synthesis? Yes, you should use quotes in synthesis. You should quote things. Can you include a counter argument? You can't. It's not required, but if you want to, you can. Can we use more than 3 sources? Yes. Just don't try to cite all of them because that's not like you don't get bonus points for that. Should you use rhetorical strategies or devices? Whatever you see that you could write about best. An analogy is like a comparison. MCQ is worth 45%. That is correct. So each question is worth 1 point. Can anime be used for FRQ? Yeah, it happens all the time. Just make sure you explain like what it's about because your reader probably won't know. Well, they might know. I don't know. What's an allusion? It's a reference to something famous. Will there be a timer for each essay? So if you're taking the paper test, the proctor keeps track of your time and they're supposed to like write it on the board or something, I think. But if you're taking the digital test, I think there's like a built-in timer. I'm not sure though, because I haven't seen the platform. We are doing paper. Is leading into the quotes necessary? Yeah, you don't want to just drop them into your essay. Yes, just having a thesis is a valid intro. That's totally fine. It's nice to have a couple sentences because sometimes just a thesis seems abrupt, but it's fine. What's the most important thing to have in our thesis? For rhetorical analysis, you must have rhetorical choices. For the other two, it helps if you just make sure you're asserting a clear position, like pick a side. How long should we take on each MCQ? The reading sometimes takes a little more than the writing. So I would say no more than 35 minutes on the reading and 25 on the writing-ish. Like that's going to vary for people. How many paragraphs is recommended? Intro, 2 body paragraphs, or 3 and a conclusion. So anywhere from 3 to 5 paragraphs, depending on how you want to do things. I say 3 because some people do an intro and 2 bodies, and that's all they have time for. That's fine. If you can do an intro, 2 bodies, and a conclusion, that's also fine. If you can do an intro and 3 bodies and no conclusion, it's fine. So lots of ways to write the essays, guys. Don't stress about it too much. Do graders switch essays? No, they don't. Well, they did last year. Normally they don't. Last year was like a whole weird scenario. Thank you so much, Will. So basically, like if I'm assigned question 2, I read question 2 the entire time, or I'm supposed to. Last year was kind of like a weird thing where we got to read all the essays, but we had to still be trained on them. Thank you, Will. I so appreciate the roses. So like your readers will be trained on whichever essay they're doing, I promise. And the training is like pretty intense. So like they're not just like, here are these essays, go for it. They train you. Let's see. How should I write my intro for rhetorical analysis? Explain the rhetorical situation and have a thesis with choices. What are some strong vocab words? Well, that's a good question. It's kind of hard because like without knowing the prompt, it's hard. I would look up SAT words and maybe choose like a few that you maybe could use to like, but it's if you have a list and you try to force it, it doesn't always sound good. Can I use outside evidence in my synthesis essays? You can as like your commentary for a broader context, but like make sure you're still citing 3 sources. You can gain complexity with a counter argument. It's not guaranteed though. If I write 2 body paragraphs, will I need 3 sentences of evidence per question? Kind of. That's like the general formula. You want to have a claim, evidence, commentary, and you want more commentary than evidence, meaning like you want to devote more page space to the commentary. Yeah, 3 is required for the sources. 4 is usually, I don't want to say it's usually stronger, but it can be. It's a safety net for sure. Thank you for sharing the live, and thank you for the likes, by the way. A synthesis essay. Can I explain what it is? I have a whole video on that. I would really recommend that you watch the video. I don't mean to dismiss your question, but I answered what a synthesis is earlier. How controversial can you get with your evidence? That's a good question. Okay, when people talk about controversial subjects, they sometimes state opinions and not facts. So if you're going to talk about something controversial, because I've seen essays from a variety of different topics where people have touched controversial topics, and like I've seen like different perspectives. As long as you are arguing it well, it's fine. So try to make sure. Oh, you're welcome, Molly. Try to make sure that you are providing facts and like actually supporting what you're saying. Because sometimes controversial topics get like people get into opinion mindsets. But your reader is not supposed to project their bias onto your essay. Prompt predictions. I don't have any predictions. I'm waiting for them. I hope it doesn't happen this year, but I'm per se, but because we've had a lot of like American speeches for rhetorical analysis, I'm waiting for it to be something else. I'm waiting for something old or something from like a person from another country or like not a speech. So that's not really a prediction though. The Tulin model can be good. Yeah, a lot of people teach that as a way to teach argument, so that's fine. Is it good for a thesis? It can be. It definitely can be. Someone asked something about psychology. Hold on. Oh, no, I can't find it. Can I do the FRQs out of order? Yes. Oh, can we use psychology as outside evidence? Absolutely. So, like, if you happen to know about, like, I don't know, Freud or Skinner or something, or like some famous experiment that fits the prompt, go for it. Is it bad if I write tiny? Yeah, they can zoom in. They can zoom in. We can also change the background color to like have it be high contrast if we're having trouble reading it. How do you incorporate rhetorical devices into your thesis? So you can quite simply say, like, speaker does this choice and this choice in order to, and then have their purpose. If you're struggling with thesis statements, especially for rhetorical analysis, do a search for Coach Hall Wright's rhetorical analysis thesis. I have multiple videos, new and old, that go over all that, and they're pretty quick, and you can like kind of like see the different examples and stuff. Let's see. Can you use a rhetorical précis for the intro? You can. Sometimes they're a little time consuming, so I would kind of shorten it. I have a different template that I use for thesis statements, but a rhetorical précis technically works. They just feel a little bit formulaic, and like sometimes it's like one sentence for each thing when you can combine it in a better way, I think. So like if that's what you've been taught, don't change it. Like don't stress for tomorrow. But I do, if you're like, oh, I want to do it in a more compressed way, look at my thesis statement videos. Yeah, two to three body paragraphs is fine. How do you come up with different ideas for the body paragraph that tie back to your thesis? Oh, that's a really hard question to explain. It's a good question, but so you just need to make sure that you have like ask yourself for like argument or synthesis, like, okay, what's my position? Like, let's say it's the disobedience prompt. Why is disobedience valuable? Okay, well, it could lead to social progress. Okay, so that's one main idea. Then I got to ask myself, okay, why else is it valuable? Well, it could, you got to think, okay, it can lead to this. So you got to have like two distinct main ideas. Is it okay to use one example if the example is an anecdote? Yes, you can use personal experience, and you can just have like one. Well, when you say one example, you need one piece of evidence, at least one example per paragraph in an argument. Some people do two. Could you just do two paragraphs for argument, and how many pieces of evidence per paragraph? So if you're doing an argument essay, yes, you can do two body paragraphs. You can either do one or two pieces of evidence per paragraph. It kind of depends. Some people like to layer it, right? Like they like to have like two examples that are related and kind of go in depth. Other people are like, nope, I have one really strong example that I can say a whole lot about. And so they do that. So it just kind of depends. Do I advise against personal experience for the rhetorical essay? Yes. Do not. There's not really a reason for personal experience in rhetorical, because in rhetorical you're supposed to be analyzing choices and purpose. So they don't want you to interject yourself. Do we need to have a conclusion? No. Should we mention our counterclaim before our thesis if we have one? You don't have to. Some people do a counter argument thesis though. Should we argue in the gray or go black and white for the argument essay? That's a really good question. In most cases, if you're unsure, I would go for black or white, like meaning like go for something concrete. If you have a really good qualified argument that like you don't want to argue both sides. It's more of in these circumstances, it's this, and in these circumstances, it's that. So you don't do like one paragraph yes and one paragraph no, because that's equivocating, which means you're arguing both sides, and that's against, like, don't do that. It's in the rubric that you're not supposed to. So if you're not sure about the gray, then definitely just do concrete. Just pick a side. For most students, it is genuinely better to pick a side. You don't need a conclusion. No, it's considered a rough draft. So if you don't have time for a conclusion, you don't have to have one. There's no penalty for not having one. There's nothing in the rubric that says you have to have one. Sophistication point. Let me get the rhetorical analysis sophistication point video for you on YouTube. All right, it looks like we got 1 out of 2 earths to meet our goal. So if anybody on TikTok wants to send an earth, that would be awesome. Here is on YouTube. Here is the rhetorical analysis sophistication video. Oh, if you qualify something, basically what it means is like you're saying like it's not, let's see, let me give an example. It's like, I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head. It's like when you're not committing to either side. You're kind of saying, okay, in these circumstances, it's this, but in these circumstances, it's this. Like you're kind of arguing that it's not always one way or the other. There's like other sides. Yeah, someone said qualifying is saying unless. That's it's like setting parameters. Space CAT is an acronym. Space is the rhetorical situation, and CAT stands for choices, appeals, and tone. So that's like what you are looking for. So basically, you use it by. You want to think about why the speaker is making those choices for that audience on that occasion. I have a whole video on YouTube about Space Cat, and I have a separate video about the rhetorical situation. If you have never heard those terms before, those videos might help. And I probably explain it way better in those videos than I can do now on live. Tips for going to a 4 to 5 in rhetorical. So you need to go from a 3 to a 4 in row B. That if you have a 3 in row B, it probably means that which is your evidence and commentary. It probably means that you like had one really good paragraph and one that was so-so, or if you had 2 paragraphs. So you want to try to elevate both paragraphs. And so to do that and make sure they're equally good, make sure that both paragraphs you're welcome, Alex. Make sure that both paragraphs connect to the message, argument, or purpose. And also make sure that you're looking at the word choice and details in both paragraphs as well. That can really help. 2 or 3 body paragraphs, whichever you prefer, whichever is going to make your argument better. Choose quality over quantity. So if you can only do 2 good body paragraphs, 2 is fine. Yeah, whatever you're best suited for. How do you qualify without equivocating? I'm going to be really honest. If you're not sure, don't try to do it tomorrow. Just pick a side. It's not something I can easily teach in like a quick live. So just pick a side tomorrow. Like don't try anything new and fancy tomorrow. Calculator for your score. There is an online score calculator. There's also a formula you can do. So there's Albert.io, I think is, and Marco Learning might have one too. Albert.io has one. Basically each multiple choice question is worth 1 point. And then you can take your essay numbers and you can multiply them by 3.0566. And you take your essay score and your MCQ score, you add them together. And then where's my sticky note? If you get between like 0 and 35 points, it's approximately a 1 composite. 36 to 51 is a 2. Sorry, it's backwards. 52 to 62 is a 3. 63 to 72 is a 4. And 73 to 100 is a 5. Now, this could be off by like 1 because they sometimes like shift it each year. So maybe it's 72 and not 73, but this is approximate. Yes, good luck, everyone. For those on the East Coast, go to bed. For those of you who are in my central time zone, it is, oh, my Fitbit actually died. I need to charge this. It's backwards on TikTok. I think it's okay on YouTube. I'm pretty sure it was backwards on TikTok, though. It is almost 11 p.m. Central Time. So if you are a student in the Central Time Zone, please go to bed and get some sleep. I'm in the West Coast. Please answer. Okay, what's your question, Lauren? 9 p.m. For those of you on the West Coast, you're still good. I won't be like the grandma who tells you to go to bed. All right. I was waiting. Lauren said, please answer my question. So I was waiting for a question, but I might have missed it. East Coast, please answer. I need to go to sleep. Okay, so what's your question? There's like 259 people watching, so there's a lot of questions on TikTok, and there's more on YouTube. Okay, let's see what we got. The synthesis is basically an argument essay with sources. Yes, that's correct. Do they curve the AP Lang test? They don't call it curving. I think they call it like norming or something. There's something statistically that they sometimes do. Does the score of a 3 mean I passed? Yes, well, we try not to use the word passed, but yeah, it's called a qualifying score. All right, let's see. For YouTube questions, the difference between a rhetorical device and a rhetorical choice. A device is typically expressed as a noun. A choice is typically expressed as a verb. You can technically write about devices on the exam. But if I have a video on that, if you're curious, but basically like pretty much any, like a device, like repetition, it's a noun, but you can turn it into a verb. You could just say repeats. So it's better to have strong verbs. Can I have a full paragraph about personal experiences on the synthesis? I would make sure you have some evidence cited in there. They don't want just like a random anecdote. You can do that on the argument, but for synthesis, you really need to make sure you have a source that you're tying it to. You can have personal experience in your commentary. So a rhetorical device is like something that the writer uses. A rhetorical strategy, they kind of mean the same thing. The College Board used to say, they went through phases. They used to say devices at one point, then they said strategies, now they say choices. But a strategy is kind of like how they're putting it together, and a device is what they're using, but they're really similar. But your prompt tomorrow is not going to say device or strategy, it's going to say choice. So just remember that a choice is what the writer is doing. So choices can be things like repetition, comparison, contrast, illusion. It could be verbs like acknowledges or presents. Oh, that's fine. Could you use personal experience on argument? Absolutely. Thank you, Hallie. I really appreciate the earths. Do you get college credit for a 2? Typically, no. Some colleges require 4s and 5s. Yeah, you don't need a conclusion. 6 pieces of evidence are required for all. So there's not really a requirement. You want to try to have, in my opinion, for rhetorical analysis, 2 pieces of evidence per paragraph. Same for synthesis, and just my opinion. And then argument 1 to 2, because sometimes you have 1 really strong example. Sometimes it's 2 per paragraph. So it just kind of depends. How do I get better at the multiple choice part? I've been getting a 10 out of 45. Okay, so I don't know that I can give you any quick tips that are really going to help you before tomorrow. If I'm being really honest, I think the best thing that you can do is figure out. I would try the writing questions, like the writing multiple choice questions, because those tend to be easier. So that's going to be passages 3, 4, and 5. They're going to be short. There's going to be 5 to 8 questions, and they're going to say this is a draft. I would start there because you can probably get more points that way. And then I would do the reading questions because, and I would just say, remember that you can use process of elimination and answer everything. Like don't leave anything blank. All right, let's see. Okay, Catherine, I see that you're, Catherine, I don't know what your question is. You've been writing like please and stuff in the chat. I guess your question's up here. Hold on. Let's see. How do I choose between 2 similar answers? Look at the word choice, because usually there's going to be like something about one of the words that's wrong. Meaning like, so for instance, there's this one question that my students were doing like a couple weeks ago, and it was like the passage was about like voting in American women. Like that was kind of like the general topic. So one of them said she was using a forthright tone about voting. Okay, that was true. It was forthright because that means bold, and she was talking about voting. Another answer choice that a lot of students wanted to pick was that it was a patronizing tone about American women, because she was talking about American women. So that part was true, but the patronizing tone part was wrong. So just because half of it was right, we don't choose that answer. So like you got to just kind of pay attention to the nuances. You're still on. I hope you get a lot of rest. Thank you for your hard work. Yeah, I took a little break between, I was live with Tim Freitas earlier tonight, and then I've been online for 2 hours. Yeah, still on. Well, because quite frankly, like, I mean, yes, I'm tired and I'll stay on for a little while longer, but like, I appreciate you all asking questions and stuff. And this is like the last night that we'll get to do this, like, meaning the test is tomorrow. So I want to make sure I'm helpful now, but I do want y'all to get some good sleep. You should go live with Marco Learning. Maybe I saw that it popped up, that they were live. So maybe we can go live with them at some point. They have good stuff too. All right, let's see. All right, we'll reset our Earth goal. Someone just asked something about how can we average a 4 on each essay. So you need a thesis, and then you want to make sure that you have at least one really good body paragraph. So depending, like, and what good means kind of depends on which prompt or like which type, but you want to make sure that you have specific evidence and thorough commentary for at least one of your body paragraphs. Is the test really that bad? I don't think so. Usually each year there's like one FRQ question that students and teachers don't love, but like as a whole, the test is not that bad. And also, like, if there's usually one multiple choice passage, which you're not allowed to talk about the multiple choice, by the way. The FRQ prompts will be released in a couple days, and then you can talk about those. But like there's usually like one multiple choice passage where the kids are like, oh yeah, there was one that was really hard. Like usually one of the reading ones. The writing passages aren't usually hard. In the synthesis, do you take a side? Yes. How long is each essay? So you have approximately 40 minutes to write each one, and you want to write as much as you can. Useful rhetorical choices. The most common ones are things like anecdote, comparison, contrast, call to action, repetition. You could look at their pronoun use. Like, are they using inclusive diction, like we and us and our? Word choice and toner and everything. You could also use verbs like presents, justifies, acknowledges, things like that. You can ignore outros. Yes. I don't know what that means. Like, I know what an outro is, but I don't know what that is in response to. At least if it's what I'm thinking of. An outro is like something on YouTube when the video is ending. Specific evidence. Okay, so for synthesis and rhetorical analysis, usually it helps if you have like a short quote, like from the passage or source. For arguments, you're coming up with your own evidence, so you need to make sure it's something that you can explain very well, like something that you can give us like 2 to 3 sentences of backstory to explain it, like because your reader might not know. Like if you're talking about like an anime, that's awesome. Make sure you explain it. If you're talking about Rosa Parks and you're like, oh, well, they'll know who Rosa Parks is. They might, but the problem is that we can't infer. So we have to go by what's on the page. So please like give us a few sentences to explain your examples and argument and then provide your commentary. Let's see. What if we can't think of evidence? You just got to try for like personal experience or something. You got to try for something. I use the acronyms CHORES to help. So current events, history, outside knowledge, reading, experience, and science. For what does good evidence look like? I would encourage you to go look at some released samples from the College Board because it's going to be easier if you see it. Someone asked, you have to cite stuff for rhetorical. You don't have to include a citation. No, you should have a quote, but not, but you don't need to cite it. Oh, conclusions. Yeah, if you don't have enough time, you don't need a conclusion. Would this be a valid intro? Yes. Um, yes, you have all the necessary components, Clark Justin. So yes, that would be fine. It's my birthday tomorrow. That's awesome. My son's birthday was yesterday. He turned 5. So hopefully you get like a cupcake or something after your AP test tomorrow. My teacher says tie back. Hold on. My teacher says tie back to the paragraph, but I don't know what that means. Oh, tie back to the thesis. So basically, you got to make sure. I say that a lot too. So make sure that you're like actually connecting back to the topic that you're supposed to be talking about, because sometimes paragraphs end really abruptly. So even if you use like a sentence like therefore, and say like therefore insert topic here is valuable because it's kind of like a summary sentence, but it helps remind us of the point you're trying to make. So I think that's what most of us mean when we say tie back. Go to rhetorical devices, contrast, repetition, comparison, anecdote, call to action. I have a YouTube video on it. My teacher says to include 5 devices in the thesis and essay. 5 is too many, in my opinion. 2 to 3. The 2 to 3 ones you could write about the best. Ideally, you'll do them in chronological order, like divide the passage into sections. What's a good transition sentence starter? I have a YouTube video on this. If you type in Coach Hall writes topic sentences, I have some sentence starters for transitions in that video. Is panicking worth it? If you mean for tomorrow, try to stay calm. What is an allusion? It is a reference to something like famous. Like if I said, "Oh, that's a David and Goliath story," meaning like it's an underdog story. If people are familiar with the biblical allusion, they would know what I meant. So it's just kind of like a reference to something famous that people are familiar with. Yeah, so logos, ethos, and pathos are not actually devices, they're appeals. They're in a lot of things, but we actually don't really love seeing people write a whole paragraph about logos, ethos, and pathos, because choices create appeals. So we really want you to be analyzing the choice that makes the appeal. So for instance, if you know that something is logical, ask yourself, why is it logical? Is it facts, statistics, examples? That kind of thing. So if instead of saying like the writer uses logos or the writer appeals to logic, talk about like the examples and why they're logical. Same with emotion. Don't just say uses pathos. You could say appeals to and then tell us the emotion. Like, because if you just say emotion, it's really empty. We don't know what you're talking about. So is it fear? Is it nostalgia? Like, what's the emotion? And usually things like word choice and detail create an emotional appeal, sometimes examples. If you're curious about that, I have a video about rhetorical appeals on YouTube. So parallelism, a lot of students try to write about that because it's kind of easy to spot, but it's kind of hard to write about sometimes. So that one's a little bit trickier. But you might look up some examples of parallelism if you're not sure. Yes, if you're on the East Coast, please go to bed. It's probably pretty late there. In fact, I'm probably gonna be wrapping up the live pretty soon as well. Thank you all for the support, though. I really do appreciate it. Time management for writing the essays. Have a plan because that really does help. It prevents writer's block, in my opinion, in some sense. Short intros, worst case scenario, just a thesis. You can do 2 body paragraphs or 3. Only include a conclusion if you have time and it's going to help your essay. Thank you, Chloe. Oh, my neck just popped again. Let's see. How many sentences should each paragraph have? So topic sentence, 1 to 2 sentences of evidence, about 3 sentences of commentary, repeat that, and then a concluding sentence. So some paragraphs can be quite long. Thank you for the gift. Oh, thank you, Alondra. Hypophora. Well, some people pronounce it differently, but I was always told it was hypophora. It's basically when you ask a question and answer it. So it's kind of like a rhetorical question is like you ask a question that you don't really intend for people to answer. But hypophora is when you ask it and answer it. So you're like not giving them time to think about it. You're just telling them the answer. All right. Let's see. It is 11:13 my time. So I will take, let's see, 5 questions from TikTok, 5 from YouTube, and then I'm going to log off. But before I do, a couple things. If you're still wanting to study, please lean on my content for support. It helps me if you go to YouTube, if I'm being honest, because there's more content there. It's longer. Yes. I've been told you can listen to the videos at like, I talk quickly anyway, but you can listen to the videos at like a faster speed. You can also fast forward through them and look at the slides if you want to. I don't care. But feel free to look at those. I also have TikTok content, but that's a little bit harder to organize. Also, tomorrow after the test, please do not start talking about the test. Please don't post on social media about it. Because that's against like their policies from the College Board. Also, don't just immediately unfollow or unsubscribe tomorrow, because if you are a junior who's about to be a senior this summer, I will be doing college prep content. And then in the fall, I'll go back to AP Lang. If you find my content helpful, I would love it if you would recommend my stuff to the kids who are taking the class at your school next year as well. All right. So I think that was everything I wanted to say. Yes, please let's try to get to 50,000 likes because we're at 42.2 on TikTok. So let's see if we can get to 50,000 by the time I answer these questions. So I'm doing 5 from TikTok, 5 from YouTube. Let's see. I'm going to try to answer ones that I haven't answered quite a lot this live. Okay, 6 points on all the FRQs. So the sophistication point is going to be the hardest. So you need to make sure that you're being very thorough, and you need to make sure that you are thinking beyond like the passage itself. If you're not sure, I would go look at, if you're really concerned about the sophistication point, go watch my rhetorical analysis sophistication point video. I think that will help. Also, read a few essays tonight from the College Board samples that got the sophistication point, and read the commentary to see why they earned that point. Because if you're a visual person, it can kind of help to see it and kind of mimic it that way. Do they grade harshly on spelling? No, they don't. They say there's like a bullet point about spelling. I wish they would take that off because no, they don't. You can have spelling mistakes and it's fine. Can you write the essays in any order? Yes, you should try to, in my opinion, consider synthesis first, just because it's the most time consuming. And then I would say write them, like put your weakest essay last, because it's okay to rush your weak essay. Can I use just pop culture evidence, or do I have to switch it up? It's probably better if you switch it up, but like honestly, at the end of the day, write about the evidence that you can write about best. So if you have only got pop culture references, that's okay. You do not need a counter argument. No, it's, if you want to have one, great, but it's not required. So commentary, quick tips for commentary: use the word because or the phrase in order to, and then try to use strong verbs. Thank you for all the likes on TikTok, by the way. Verbs like showcases, illustrates, highlights, emphasizes, things like that. Just keep asking yourself why for the commentary. All right, a few more on each platform. I don't have any prompt predictions. I just think that like I'm worried they're going to switch it up for rhetorical analysis. I'm worried they're going to give you all something old and or something from like it really wouldn't matter if it was something from a non-American writer. That wouldn't be a big deal. You just might not know the historical context as much. Or it could be something that's like not a speech or a letter. So we'll see. I hope it's like a nice contemporary American speech, kind of like they did last year and the year before. Can you use personal pronouns when writing about personal experience? Yes. Like when we say don't use personal pronouns in writing, we mean like don't say I think or I believe. But if you are writing about personal experience, yes, you can use personal pronouns. Otherwise, it won't make sense. All right, let's see. All right, couple questions on YouTube, resetting the gift goal on TikTok for 2 roses, I think. My teacher said to have 2 strong body paragraphs instead of rushing for 3. Is this true? Yes, for many students it is. So using the appeals to X and rhetorical verbs would count for the components of the sophistication point. There's more to the sophistication point than that. It's hard to explain. Okay, so I already tried to answer about the getting the 10 out of 45 at Roblox 500. Please go watch my AP Lang MCQ video. In fact, let me put it in the chat because if I have an MCQ video that's going to help you out, it's probably going to be this video right here. But just do the best you can tomorrow. You're gonna be fine. And honestly, remember, y'all are more than a score too. Like, do the very best you can. You've been working hard all year, but like, don't get discouraged if the test is hard because it doesn't mean that you're going to score poorly. So work really hard tomorrow. What is line of reasoning? It is a logical progression of ideas. So for you to create a line of reasoning, you need a thesis. You need 2 to 3 clear main ideas. You need to support those main ideas because they should be your main ideas are based off of your thesis. You need to support them with evidence and commentary, have more commentary than evidence, and use good transition words. That's kind of the gist of line of reasoning, just kind of like a well-structured essay. Someone said something about timing. What was it? Thank you for the rose, by the way. Thank you, Lily. For timing or pacing, there should okay, you're gonna want to kind of keep track of your time. You can wear a watch or bring a watch as long as it's not a smartwatch, no timers or stopwatches. You want to make sure that you like sometimes it helps if you write the start time of each task, like I don't know, on your paper somewhere, like your passage booklet or something. That way you know approximately when you started and when you intend to stop. That way, because it's very easy to spend more than 40 minutes per essay. So that could help. Also, know how much time you're supposed to have because I've heard stories where the proctor tried to like end the exam too early. So you get 2 hours and 15 minutes total for the FRQs. Do they accept digital watches? It can be digital, it just can't be a smartwatch. And like it can't be beeping and stuff during the test. Okay. Oh, where's the MCQ video that I linked? I don't know if I can put it on TikTok. Am I allowed to comment on my own live? If you type it, I linked it on YouTube. I'm sorry for those on TikTok. If you search for Coach Hall Writes AP Lang MCQ, it's a pretty recent video. I put it out like a month ago. Thank you so much for the likes. I so appreciate it. And we've reached a few different gift goals today. So I appreciate that as well. Okay, I'm getting a little bit tired, so I think I'm going to call it a night. But before I do, let me give you a quick pep talk as if you were my own students. Oh, speaking of, I have to write them all letters. I wrote 2. I have a few more to write. Please know that no matter how hard the test is tomorrow, you are well prepared. You are incredibly smart. So don't feel defeated. Keep going. Use all your time on those essays and just write and write and write. Do the very best you can. But please know that you are more than a test score. You are wonderful students. And so give it the best that you've got. Apply the skills that you've learned all year. And try not to be scared. It's okay to be nervous. Because if you're nervous or anxious, it does mean that it's important to you. It's important that you care. And I love that. But don't let it cripple you. Don't feel defeated. If you open the MCQ tomorrow and the first passage is hard, the questions might actually be easy. So don't freak out. Don't get defeated. Instead, flip your mindset and be like, not today, College Board. I'm going to show you who's boss, which sounds really cheesy. But seriously, like pep talk yourself. don't feel defeated, because if you believe that you're gonna fail, it might be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So tomorrow, work so hard, do the best you can. But you've got this. So good luck to everybody. Thank you so much for your support. Feel free to binge watch my YouTube channel. It really does help. And so I appreciate the support in that way. I will try to post a few more quick TikToks and stuff before tomorrow morning. But you all should be, most of you at least, maybe not you West Coast kids, but most of you should be getting to sleep. Remember, if your school doesn't provide it, you need hopefully two number two pencils, normal pencils. For whatever reason, they don't want mechanical. Blue or black ink pens. Choose ones that have plenty of ink and that won't smudge or bleed through. I would wear comfy clothes tomorrow. Bring a snack if you're allowed to, because you do get a 10-minute break in between the MCQ and the FRQ. But for your snack, bring something that's number one, not messy, and number two, allergy friendly. Just FYI. It's just kind of nice to be courteous. And yeah, I think that's it. I don't think I have any other last minute tips. So great job, everybody. Thank you so much for your support. And like I said, don't unfollow immediately tomorrow, please, because I will be doing some content over the summer for college prep, and I would love to help you through your college application process. And also, if you found my videos helpful, please tell next year's AP Lang students at your school about it, so that way we can get word of mouth and I can do this again next year. All right, bye, everybody. Thank you so much. So bye, TikTok. Thank you. All right, awesome. And bye, everybody on YouTube. Thank you so much.